circle from all that's stressed. We trust the guardians, trust the guides, trust the open and what's inside. When the moon is high, it's time to fly. Open your mind, let it all unwind. Let's get disengaged, time to engage. Turn another page, free from your cage. Get disenraged. When you feel like you've had enough and the week was busy and tough, you need a break, you need some fun. You need to take time from the run. We'll blow your mind, we're just in time. Seek and ye shall find. Time to unwind, let's get disenraged. Time to engage. Turn another page, free from your cage. Get disenraged. Aliens, ghosts, spirits and shadows, spirituality, ultra reality, the Bible, the pagans, all the conspiracies, tarot, astrology, an alternate history. Open your heart to other possibilities and get disenraged. Time to engage. Turn another page, free from your cage. Get disenraged, 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 disenraged.
What's up, everyone? Happy Tuesday. What's going on, Jennifer?
Hey, doing good. Had a win this week and
Yeah.
a loss this week. First of all, and they both involved my dogs. First one, we got them to go to a doggy park and meet other doggies.
Oh, good. Did they get along with the other dogs?
They did really, really good. We're learning what they like to do. Anya is very timid, actually, but Bodhi gets right in there. And so that has been good because we've been nervous about that. So they're doing great. And then my loss was that somebody has been eating my doilies
Ha ha
that I've
ha.
knitted. I
Wow.
keep finding them. Yeah. So I had 4. I'm down to 2. And my mom made this one for me. The other ones I've been making, and I'm just like, they're good for like coasters because they really absorb liquid good. But this one, I just
Now it's a dog toy.
strangled
Now it's
the
a
dog.
dog toy. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
not anymore. It's trash now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Little
I'll never forget, like, we once took Honey and Kobe to like a thing called Puppapalooza, which was basically like this giant ass festival where everyone brought their dog, and it was like a fair for dogs, and there were booths for exhibit for all this pet stuff, and you could get your dogs groomed, and you could buy your dogs outfits, and you could get your dogs to do agility training. And Kobe, for some reason, really liked the agility. He really liked getting up on the balance beam and walking on the balance beam. And Honey didn't have any time for that. She didn't care about it. She was a chihuahua. She was like, like whatever. and so my favorite moment from Puppapalooza was Victor and I, like, we basically went over, I forget where we were going. We were going to like some sort of like grandstand event. And so everyone's bringing their dogs up into the bleachers or whatever. And so I've got Honey and Victor has Kobe on his lap. And up next to Victor comes a Great Dane. And so you got Kobe, who's this little fucking Chiweenie, and the Great Dane. And Kobe doesn't, he like looks at the Great Dane, he just does this. And he's like, if I can't see it, it's not there. If I can't see it, it's not there. And he refused to look at the Great Dane. Brother, he's like, I can't see it. I can't see it. because Kobe does not like other dogs or people at all. He always likes to hide. He's very shy. Whereas Honey was always just like, well, always wanted to wear clothes so that she would get more attention and like all this stuff. She loved being around people.
Oh, right on. Yeah, they have like one of the dog parks I like to go to is just a big fenced in area, and then they have like the little dog fenced in area that's right next to it. They must have had some kind of convention because there had to be like 50 little tiny like slipper sized dogs at this just running around. And I was like, oh my God, are they going to engage my dog's predator instinct? Because they look like little squirrels just zipping around. And they did fine though. They just went right up to the gate and they were racing with the little dogs and stuff. But I guess they like to keep them separate so the big dogs don't hurt the little dogs or trounce them or whatever. But it was really cute and fun. And so that's very encouraging. I was very happy. I haven't totally mentally damaged my babies.
No, they're probably fine. Naruto says, Karlyn, did you hear the penny got canceled a couple weeks ago? I have no idea what that means. Do you have any idea what that means?
The penny got canceled. Oh, yeah. I do. They stopped making pennies.
Oh, right. Oh, I don't give a fuck if they keep making pennies. Who even uses pennies anymore? Like how I don't even know the last time I had change.
Oh, I got tons of change. I use change all the time.
Oh man.
I had a Tupperware container of it, and I had sat it in this room when we were showing the house, and I noticed all of a sudden that it was about half as full as it used to be. And I realized people who are coming through the house were helping themselves to handfuls of change. And I'm like, why am I dumb? And I have this out for everybody. Yeah, I use pennies. I like to pay in cash.
Wait, people are just coming into your house and taking handfuls of change out of your change bowl?
When we had our open house, it was like after one of our open houses, I realized I had
what a shitty thing to do. Why would you even do that? What do you get? You're going to profit of, 37 cents off of stealing someone's fucking pocket change?
I pulled all the quarters out of it, so it's just like nickels, dimes, and pennies. But it was, and my parents, they have like a candy dish with a lid on it and sitting in my mother's china cabinet. And so it looks like a little, personal piece of, something pretty. And but inside she keeps chocolates usually. So she went to go grab a chocolate out of it, lifted the lid, and there were 4 wrappers balled up and left in there that someone had come through their house, opened up their private little decorative item to see what was in it and went, oh, chocolate, ate the chocolate instead of putting in the trash, threw the wrappers back inside. Like,
wrong with people, man? The fuck is wrong with people? Hey, guess who's here, Jennifer? Amalek's here. Amalek, I'm glad you're back. We weren't sure you were going to join us.
I was over doing a stream with your good friend Ralph, and
no way.
Got it done. Yeah, it was very fun.
Were you really? What were you talking to him about?
I was on the well, it was fun. It was supposed to be about this whole fake account person that I sent you earlier, and the whole like location reveal topic or whatever. But as it goes, wherever I go, the topic was basically Christianity for 2.5 hours, as he every single super chat like was sent crying about me to him, and it was just very fun. We had a good time, and so I was over hanging out there. But then I came over here because I saw you sent me the link, and I saw your friend here, Naruto.
And Naruto
0076 asked a question about the penny, and it's very important, and it relates to tonight's topic. And I instantly, I was like, I was about to go get food, and I was like, nope, this is important because you said it doesn't matter, but it does.
I saw something about the penny costs like $3.57 actually to make one penny. Okay. And they went, it's
that
no
is
longer
true.
cost effective.
That is true.
It's some sort of symbolic thing. He's going to say it's symbolic of something.
It's not just symbolic. Listen. Right now, if you go into any Chabad place or any Orthodox Jews or conservative Jewish like synagogue or anything like that, 1 second, hold on.
I've got them on pins and needles. I can't take it.
Sorry. I'm getting audio coming through my ear. I gotta stop because I can't. I got it. Okay, sorry. Okay, so what it is it's a prophecy. It's a prophecy. It's part of the coming Mashiach. They talk about it in the Talmud. They say in Sanhedrin 118a, the rabbis teach that in the footsteps of the Mashiach, that there will be no peruta, which is the smallest coin, in one's purse. Yet people will worry about it. It will be sought after. That's the passage, basically.
No way.
But what it's saying is that you will know that the Mashiach is living among you when we stop making the penny, when they stop printing the penny.
No.
And hold on, and this isn't just me saying this. I'm not just, hey, like look at this crazy verse, and I'm like doing my own, schizo posting. if you go to Chabad's website or you talk to any rabbi and you ask them what I just told you, they will say, yes, that is a sign that we view that the Mashiach is among us.
The Messiah. Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, I had to look it up.
So in the Kabbalah, they then mention this coin constantly, all the time, all the time. Whenever they're talking about money, they're talking about the smallest coin. They use like words that are like for little or small, and mixing with like coinage coins, like coinage terms, and it's all references back to. Like I said, it's Shabbat 118a is where it's at, but it's what it is it's there's a whole like metaphorical Hasidic translation of this. The Hasids are super into this prophecy. So
does it just pertain to America, or does it pertain to the whole world, or Israel, or is it just all about America?
Great question. So they're talking specifically in their eschatology, which just means like their end times lore or whatever, however you want to phrase it. They believe that is only one can be ascendant. So when Rome is ascendant, then Jerusalem must fall or be subservient, and when Jerusalem is ascendant, then Rome must fall, or Rome must be subservient, right? So right now they believe they are in the age of Edom, the exile of Edom. For 2,000 years they have been exiled from their homeland. This is what they believe, like I said, and that they are in exile in Edom. Edom is Rome. Esau, Edom, Rome, these things all go together. And basically what the rabbis teach is that America is the new Rome. Bibi just said it the other day. I'm sure maybe you saw the clip or not. I'm not sure. He just said it. Oh, what are you reading? Oh, I'm reading a book about Jerusalem versus Rome. And he's called America Rome several times. So they believe that basically that this is part of the fall of Rome. The coinage problem.
Well, and I've heard that once you stop producing certain coins, like you stop producing the lowest denominations, it can signal that the currency is very unstable as well.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's definitely for sure. That's very true. I just think this is like I wouldn't even say that this is, because a lot of people will be like, oh, so you believe in their end times. What I'm saying is like this is like a playbook or like a blueprint. This is like what they do over and over. So you can go back in time and look at coinage issues that our people have had historically, and then almost one-to-one recreations of this. And you can even find rabbis and Christians citing those same verses, saying, look, we're in the end times, Mashiach will be here tomorrow, because we stopped printing whatever, the pence or whatever, coin from those local areas.
Well, they quit printing
they always use this like that.
They quit printing hay pennies in England, I think, a while ago, and that was when England was the big, but I think, like, I grew up in a church where we expected that Jesus was about to return in any second, and we constantly had to be on alert for the call to flee. And so when I hear, oh, look, it's the sign, the Messiah, I just kind of go, I can't roll my eyes hard enough. But I understand that that's a pretty big deal for them. And, okay, fine. Let's get this ball rolling. I'm ready. I'm ready for
that's what they've always been. So basically they've been saying any day now since the very first Christians. The first Christians actually believed in an idea that Jesus said that I will return to you before the last of the generation that saw me dies. Right.
Oh, so, yeah. We kept saying, oh, it'll happen in our lifetime. It'll happen in our lifetime. Yeah. And so we weren't sure if it was the lifetime of our grandparents, the lifetime of us, and when our founder died, we all had a big crisis because we were sure it was going to be within his lifetime. So when he died and it hadn't happened yet, it was like big crisis went through our church. It was crazy.
A super common thing, basically. I've studied like end times eschatology, like, I don't know, like instances of that. Like, I wouldn't say cult, but whatever.
Yeah.
They all had it.
So not to like totally derail the topic, because we're going to be getting into the Kabbalah video and picking up where we left off. But Amalek, did you happen to have a chance to watch that video that I sent you in your DMs?
Not yet.
Okay. No, this is actually perfect. This is perfect timing because both of you are here, and Jennifer, you need to see this video as well. It's completely off topic. This was a video. You're gonna fucking love this, Amalek. This was a video from the last stream we just did, which was a socialist professor from Villanova Nova talking to a bunch of DSA kids. Basically, he was talking about liberalism and fascism, and it's not really relevant. But Jennifer, you're gonna watch it regardless because you need to learn this information. Okay, here is the video. It's just a couple minutes long, but you guys are gonna love it.
Okay.
The German Nazis killed, according to some statistics, 6 million people in gas chambers. They had plans to kill 60 million in the East. They were going to genocidally eliminate the socialist alternative of the Soviet Union. That was the plan. Hitler spelled it out, and Stalin knew it was coming, and he had to buy time in order to defend the people against fascist onslaught.
So the professor's premise is the goal of the Nazis was literally to genocide the socialists in the Soviet Union.
So liberalism and fascism are best understood as capitalist modes of political management. The former rules primarily by consent, and the latter principally by repression. But they often work in tandem with one another. Liberalism, we might say, is the good cop of capitalism, and fascism is the bad cop. They both work together to ensure capitalist dominion. And this metaphor is important because, of course, if you have a choice between a good cop and a bad cop, it's much better to be working with somebody who's going to bring you coffee, let you make a phone call, try to cozy up to you, than somebody who's going to be, getting a sledgehammer out and torturing you. So there should be no kind of ultra-leftist perversion of the argument that I'm making. They work in tandem with one another to manage a capitalist society. But if we have to choose between the two, we have a much better chance working with the liberal good cop than the fascist bad cop.
So the basic premise is Hitler was trying to genocide all the socialists, and if the socialists have to choose between working with the liberals or working with the fascists are literally going to try to kill them, whereas the liberals will let them get away with shit where they can still advance their ideas.
I mean, he's not totally wrong, right?
No, he's not wrong at all. It's completely correct, actually.
It's sometimes they just say it, right? Like sometimes they just say exactly what the thing is. Yeah. Oh my, that's funny. That's a good clip.
I know. Jennifer, how do you feel about discovering that Hitler was trying to genocide the communists? Does that make you think differently about the...
I don't believe anything anymore.
That's a good
Isn't
idea.
it fascinating how everyone is like obsessed with, like that's like the crux of our morality, like that's like the linchpin of the whole thing is like arguing about, and how you view World War II is basically like the most important thing on everybody's mind in 2025.
Well, I guess because they're like Hitler was the most evilest, horriblest thing ever, and they don't ever focus on any of the other villains of history, and so everything has to revolve around him.
Imagine this. Imagine this. It would be kind of like if you're about to go on to World War I or World War II, and somebody starts talking to you about Napoleon.
Nice.
It's about the same. It's about the same distance in years or whatever. It's fucking crazy.
True. True. Yeah, it is the fulcrum, if you will, that by which everything is balancing and judged.
Yeah. Well, with our weekly descent into fascism out of the way, do you guys want to watch this Kabbalah video?
Let's go.
Yeah. All right. I don't even really remember.
We're the first. Were we?
No, we're like halfway through the first one.
Okay.
We still have the whole first one left to go. All right. I don't really remember where we are, but I'm sure you guys will.
It'll come right back to you.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It's like riding a bike.
Jewish mysticism is like that. It comes right back to you,
Yeah.
So that's a very cool form of mysticism, and we will get to it in a couple of weeks. So again, Merkava mysticism, not Kabbalah. Different kind of Jewish mysticism, but anchored in the theophany of Ezekiel and Isaiah. So as I mentioned earlier, ancient Near East prophecy is very well attested.
Wait, can you go back? I'm sorry. I know we just
major
started. I
exception
know. I don't want to be annoying. Can I just see that last part of that page? I started reading it and then he switched over.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. The Ezekiel and Isaiah stuff. This is so important. This is what's in Adam's book, really going over this stuff. But this is where Jesus comes from, guys. So Jesus, and so when we're going over this, in my view, the group of Jews who eventually become Christians that we know today as Christians, at the time they would be called followers of the way. That group came out of this school of Judaism or I'm sorry, they share the same common ancestor. That's a more accurate way to describe it, right? Where they're both like they're both like the modern versions of this old thing. So the idea of ascensions and descensions as it relates to the Messiah, and like he'll talk about all this, I'm sure. The like visions and stuff like that they have, the predictions, and it's basically like them like saying like, hey, we talked to God about like a secret plan and all this other stuff. The Christians then later interpret that as Jesus, like those prophecies are about Jesus that they see in those experiences that he's going to describe here. So whenever Paul, for example, talks about seeing Jesus or talking about Jesus, right, every time in the Bible, he's talking about an experience like just like he's about to describe. Ascension experiences, descension experiences, seeing people in the heavens, having visions, revelation, things like that. It came out of this Merkaba mystic, like Kabbalistic ideas.
Cool. Thank you for the context.
So as I mentioned earlier, ancient Near East prophecy is very well attested. The only major exception is Egypt. Egypt is the outlier. For whatever reason, there's not much in the way of Egyptian prophetic literature. Now, there's a lot of debate about why that is. We do have a quasi-prophetic document called the Prophecy of Neferti that does exist from the ancient Egyptian world. But it seems like the ancient Egyptians, for a host of reasons, and I'm happy to talk more about that later if folks are interested, for whatever reason, institutional prophecy just didn't exist. It probably had to do with the fact that Egyptian religion was very highly centralized in the temple structure, and therefore the gods just didn't interact with human beings in the same way that they did in the wider Near East. But the ancient Egyptians just don't have much in the way of prophecy. We have a lot of ancient Egyptian religious literature, just not prophetic literature. I will say that outside of ancient Israel, the best attestation of prophecy in the ancient Near East world more generally is from the Neo-Assyrian period. Now, this may be a little deceptive because it just so happens that the Assyrian Empire was destroyed and they managed to burn down the main temple, the main library of Ashurbanipal. And when they burned that library down, the entire library was preserved. We have basically an entire ancient Neo-Assyrian library. It's like the Library of Ancient Alexandria, but
story.
over in Iraq. It has tens of thousands of...
How was it burned down and preserved?
He'll explain it.
Oh, okay.
Uniform tablets that are in great shape because unlike burning libraries down now, right?
By the way, did you guys just see that they just opened a massive museum in Egypt? Like a big fuck off museum of like all their Egyptian treasures, and they had this massive like opening ceremony where like royals went to it and stuff.
In addition to the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities?
Yeah, this is a brand new museum that is just opened in Egypt. It's like right next to the pyramids. That is very fancy.
Well, they do keep finding more tombs and things, so I can see they might need some more space.
Maybe.
What you should do about this is my like kind of whatever. Whenever Egypt's brought up, I always bring this up. What you got to realize about Egypt is like 15 any given year. At any given, it's different per year, but at any given year, like 15 to like 40% it's been a huge part of their economy before is tourism. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's completely based. It's almost like their economy is based around how can we like drum up Westerners to be like, oh my God, I want to take a trip to Egypt. Okay.
So I mean, to be fair, I really want to go to Egypt. Like, I want to go to Egypt real fucking bad.
Cool. I'm just saying that they're very and the way that their government handles archaeology as well as like the whole thing is very corrupt. I would say. It's a very corrupt country. So I would just say whenever as a lay person like I am and like everyone else listening to this pretty much is. Like whenever you hear news out of Egypt of a new discovery or a new thing or like whatever, you should always be skeptical is what I would say. And that skepticism almost always will pay off is what I've found. I've come to that conclusion from like observing and getting excited about new discoveries and then becoming disappointed that it wasn't true over and over and over again in my like life, like researching this stuff. So that's why I come to that conclusion. And I highly recommend that position for everyone to take when they get new stuff from Egypt.
That's
I know it's no fun.
Though.
I know.
So fucking lame.
You remember the last ones? That was like the
No.
poles underneath the pyramids. They were like,
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
dude, trust me,
Like,
I
why
wish I could not do this, but I'm telling you, this is the better way
Like,
to think about it.
why do they have to make shit up though? Why can't the fact that, hey, we have pyramids and mummies and lots of ancient things and it's like a very sacred place, like why can't that just be enough to drive tourism? Why can't that just be enough?
Well,
Like,
pyramids
how
were
much more
so
people want?
last decade, Karlyn. We need something fresh and exciting now.
Man, I want to go to Egypt so bad.
I want them to open the vault under the Sphinx. I totally believe it's
Yeah,
there.
me too.
That's what I want, but they won't.
But they're
And-
not going to tell it. They've already opened the vault. They already know what's in there. They've probably already taken it out.
Oh,
They've
yeah.
already hid it in an underground thing somewhere. We're never going to see it. Whatever.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, as long as Zahir Hawass, is it Hawass? Yeah, Zahir Hawassi or whatever his name is. As long as he's in charge, no one's going to get anywhere. He went out for maybe 5 years, and they brought in this female to head everything, and she started looking at things in a little more pragmatic, practical. You know, maybe there is more to this than we think. And she got taken out quick, and they brought Zahir right back.
Yep.
Yeah, yep.
Mhm.
But I think he's gonna tell how the fire started, or I'm sorry, preserved this thing still. And if he doesn't, I'll tell you. It's interesting actually, because there's a modern parallel. But go ahead.
The books tend to burn. That's bad. If you burn down an ancient cuneiform library, right? Those texts are all preserved on clay tablets.
Yeah.
And burning clay tablets makes them more likely to survive.
Oh.
So thank God they burned it down.
Yeah.
Right? Because had they not burned it down,
had they not burned it down, it wouldn't have survived.
So
Isn't that
we have
crazy?
the entire library
That's
of
funny.
Ashurbanipal. It's in the British Library because they're great at stealing things. And
Okay,
so what we have is
communism,
an
a little
enormous
communism being
amount.
out there. Did you hear that?
No, what do
He
you
said
say?
that he said they're in the British Library because they're famous for stealing things. And then he
Oh,
kept going.
jeez.
He is a communist, by the way. I super confirmed it since the last time we spoke.
Oh
I
yeah, he's
talked to some
100% a
friends.
communist.
I mean, I just mean like he organizes, and there's a non-zero chance that he like appears in one of your videos at one point, as far as like being in those groups. He like is an organizer from what I can tell. He
So we're
goes
gonna-
to these meetings and speaks and stuff like that.
We're gonna add him to the list, the communist list.
Of literature from this time period, including prophetic literature. In the ancient Assyrian context, what they would do is that individual prophetic utterances would be requested by a leader, typically the king. Those utterances would be written down, and then a digest of those ecstatic utterances would be collected together on large clay tablets, and then those clay tablets would be stored in the library of Ashurbanipal. So we have individual utterances stored together on bigger tablets and then archived. The exact same thing happened in the ancient Israelite context too. Many of the documents that we have, for instance, the book of Isaiah, is not written by one person. Isaiah is at least written by 3 people, right? At 3 different times with 3 different agendas. All of the various Isaiah texts got edited together into one digest, and that Isaiah prophecy became the book that we now know of as Isaiah. So the exact same literary and material culture in ancient Syria is also attested in ancient Israel, which we shouldn't be surprised about because ancient Israel isn't special. Now, I know that some of us were raised with this chosen people stuff, but the ancient Israelites were an ancient Near Eastern people.
Oh no!
And they did what ancient Near Eastern people did. Sorry, not sorry. So we know a lot about ancient Neo-Assyrian prophecy. We'll get to Israelite prophecy in just a minute. We know a little bit about their prophetic techniques. We know, for instance, that they engaged in dancing. Dancing was one of the mechanisms by which both Israelite and Neo-Assyrian prophets managed to work themselves into a kind of ecstatic state.
Wow.
We don't know what the dancing looked like.
What kind of dancing were they doing?
Maybe it was the Dougie. I don't know.
You know, like the whirling dervishes.
Whatever the dancing was, it seemed to
I don't know if it was
get
like
them
that, but
into
similar
Lindy Hop.
idea.
It got them into an ecstatic state, and in those ecstatic states, they would
just remember
they
this
would
kind of stuff
shout.
too when you see them on like Twitter, like complaining about like, oh, look at these savage pagan rituals and dances, and oh, look how disgusting these tribal people are, and all this other stuff. Their entire religion is based on exactly the same thing, literally the exact same thing.
They're the
They
only
are
ones who are
total
allowed to
hypocrites.
have it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're total hypocrites.
Can't let
Like,
anyone else have the magic.
Yeah,
right?
The whole premise is so cynical of theirs, where they're just like, oh, we're the only ones who have the knowledge, while also denying that their origins came from the same exact thing as every other one of these systems. And it's just that their system, like their ideology, is, I mean, not to use a term that's probably overused here, but it's kind of like fascistic theology, right? Where it's like demanding that only it can survive or only it can stay alive. Well, it and its like little cousin, Judaism, basically.
Wait, are you saying the Jews are the real fascists?
I just think it's like ethno-fascism, right? Like that's a good, or I'm sorry, religious fascism, theological fascism is kind of the way that Christianity kind of spread, or I'm sorry, like maintained power or whatever.
It reminds me of
seems
like
anti-Semitic. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, very anti-Semitic.
just reminds me of like the South Park when they were making fun of the founder of Mormonism, and he's like, and nobody can have sex with anybody else but me, and no dancing. It's like, yeah, pretty much.
He was one of these guys, by the way, too. But Joseph Smith,
Oh yeah.
he was
Really?
into Merkaba mysticism. Yeah, Merkaba mysticism.
How
He
does
was
that not surprise me?
I think Paul and Joseph Smith, or maybe Paul and Brigham Young is a better example, but both of them are good examples. Are very similar people.
Fascinating.
The god had to tell them, and a scribe would write those ecstatic utterances down. They also engaged in self-laceration. So, as you may or may not know, self-harm is a pretty common motif in many mystical practices, most famously, for instance, among the Maya people. The Maya would they would pierce their tongue or their genitals, and they would pull string with barbs on it through their tongue or genitals in order to inhibit.
For the record, as someone who used to have my tongue pierced until my dentist yelled at me and told me, take that thing out of your mouth or you're going to knock your front teeth out. Getting your tongue pierced actually doesn't hurt all that much. It's actually one of like the least painful piercings I ever got. But like pulling a barbed wire through it would fucking hurt, man.
Did I tell you about the guy that I knew in my pagan circle who had a forked tongue? And he said he did it with dental floss. Like he had a tongue piercing and then he slowly worked the dental floss towards the end and he could move the tips autonomously.
That's gross.
It was freaky AF, dude.
Make themselves in a great deal of pain. That blood would be gathered into a pot, and then the paper with the blood soaked would be burned, and in the burning smoke, Maya kings would see visions. Self-harm is a very common thing that happens in many prophetic cultures. The self-harm also occurred in ancient Mesopotamian culture, and it seems like they engaged in something like flagellation, probably, to whipping themselves in order to use perhaps the endorphins or the serotonin release to get them into ecstatic states. Although there's some medical debate about whether blood loss would have been helpful in getting you into an ecstatic state. I don't intend to find out. So at any rate, self-harm was also part of this. Also notice that in the ancient Israelite law, there are several prohibitions on self-harm, especially in terms of religious self-harm, specifically things like tattooing and harming yourself on the occasion of the dead. So it seems like the Israelites knew about these practices and forbid them. So if you've ever heard things about you're not allowed to get tattoos if you're Jewish or whatever, it actually comes from those kinds of laws. Although also there's a persistent myth that if you have tattoos, you can't be buried in a Jewish graveyard. That's nonsense. I don't know where these weird things get started, but that's a thing people say, and they're wrong.
They get started on 4chan and stuff. I
we
trust
also
me.
know
Dr. Sledge, I'm constantly debunking them. I hate it too. Trust me, dude. This is where we're at. You know what I mean? Like we got these stupid these Gentiles and their lies, and then these Jews and their lies. They just can't stop it, right?
We live in a post-truth society. Like, I mean, but for real though, like literally no one cares about the truth. Like someone was complaining to me about like journalism the other day or something, and I'm like, they're like, you're not a real journalist. I'm like, what even is a real journalist? Because like literally everything is a propaganda rag. So my journalism is just as real as anyone else's because everyone else is just putting stuff out there too.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
What's interesting about what he said there about the circumcision thing too is the the circumcision at the time, where it was kind of emerging in this area, was a way that the Egyptians used against their slaves at some points, and then it's believed that it kind of like branched out of that and branched out of there into Jewish culture, but that the reason that that was done was that was seen as like the moderate position for mutilation, because everyone else was doing like crazy full-on castration and full like super body mutilation, where you're like removing breasts and all sorts of and like crazy body mutilation, and circumcision was seen as the moderate position. How weird is that? And that's why
crazy.
that's why it caught on, kind of, is because it wasn't as extreme, which is
they would castrate a lot, like the manservants and stuff to royalty and so, and that was very, very common. But this may have been the less extreme. I don't know.
A lot of Egyptians and like Coptics and like basically like a lot of circumcision like kind of developed in that region from those traditions.
You mean it wasn't done for cleanliness, or because they had a symbol of the seal of David or the shield of David?
No.
Ancient Near Eastern prophets could be both women.
Think about how fucked up it is, though, that people even today still accept circumcision as something that has to be done. Like that's totally fine. Like, yes, let's just like moments after the baby is born, let's just cut off part of their dick. That seems like a real great idea.
Let's just analyze what that does. Like we are all scientific minded people here. We can just like think about.
We talk about dicks all the time on the show. It's okay.
Okay, so let's just picture real quick. Like we know, like early childhood trauma is some of the most damaging psychological and long lasting trauma that it goes into ways and it changes the way people are and develop all the way through the rest of their life, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think that doing that to like a young child 8 days after they're born, like let's make it easier to think about. It's almost like docking a tail for a dog, right?
Yeah.
It's very similar thing. And what does that do in dogs, right? It makes them behave. It's like makes them docile, right? And it's a super traumatic thing, because like those dogs, they become it's complicated, but basically just imagine what that does to humans when you do that for hundreds of generations, thousands of generations. What does that do you think to their psyche, the way they behave? Well, let's think about it. Let's take it all the way back. What does early childhood trauma do to people? It makes them psychotic. It makes them fucked up. It makes them act in ways where they have no empathy for other people. Okay, now do that for 2,000 years to a human being.
That's crazy.
So, and they've been doing it for far longer than 2,000 years, but
that's so messed up, though. That's like legitimate.
Think about it. That's what's going on, right? So I think it should be banned globally.
Yes, I do. It's mutilation. It's fucking torture.
I'm not like a like a neocon. Like we should be like overthrowing governments, but I think we should basically be like, okay, if you're a country and you have that legalized, we're gonna like overthrow your regime and put in a regime that bans a circumcision. Like that's how I feel about the topic.
I completely agree. And also sex is way better with uncircumcised men, and you will never convince me otherwise. This is a hill I will absolutely die on. It should be fucking banned. It was wrong, and some have escaped unscathed, and those are the lucky ones. I'm just saying.
I think that also, not to change the subject away from the Jewish covenant with the dicks and things, but also the way that they mutilate women in Africa and stuff, that just, I wish there was more of an activist thing against that.
What's weird about that is that's actually like, it's obviously Muslims doing it, but it's not Quranically endorsed. What it's actually is it's a practice that predated Islam coming to that region. How interesting is that? So it basically
that's why it's not an Islamic thing necessarily so much as it is a regional thing. Because my mother was a midwife for a very long time. In her practice, she had some ladies that came up that have had that happen.
That's crazy.
And it was to hear the description of what they are now, or what the result of it, trying to be delicate here, is horrific. It's horrifying. And to me, I think we asked her why, and she said, well, it's a way to keep women it's a way to keep them in check, so that they are not desirous of being with a man, that it's only a man's privilege to be desirous of a woman, not the other way around.
It's incredibly
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think, Owl, you asked if the power chat was on, and I just turned power chat on.
And men, we have attestations of both women and men prophets. And we also, what's I think really important that doesn't get talked about enough, is that we have a third gender that is specifically connected to ancient Near Eastern prophecy.
This is it.
Specifically, the goddess Ishtar, who you may know from the name Esther. The name
I was
Esther
telling
is
you about
just a
this.
version of the name Ishtar. We know that the goddess Ishtar could convert your gender from typically male gender, man gender, to another third gender called Asinu. And these Asinu prophets would have their gender converted by Ishtar, and they could be converted and converted back.
Remember this, guys. Remember this.
Judaism
came from ancient tranny Jews. Remember that.
It did.
It came from ancient. The prophets were ancient tranny Jews, guys.
We've watched several episodes about the Jewish ideas about gender.
It's kind of crazy. I will say, like, not to defend the Jews here too much or anything, but they're like so many religions of the Iron and Bronze Age had these like weird gender concepts, and it just like makes sense. They were in a weird, different time than we are, and the reason that we have like such an aversion to it is because it built up over time of our ancestors like negatively reacting against it. That's why we have this. So they were almost every region in the world had some sort of like weird shit going on with gender in the like it's just part of being like an Iron or a Bronze Age tribe. Okay.
Did you know there's actually a map that exists on the internet somewhere? I have to find it again, where actually the socialists and the queer Marxists have documented everything that you just said, and they put it on a map around the world to say, look, there have always been people of other genders that aren't men and women, and here are all the historical examples of that happening. So they actually use that to,
Yeah, that's why it's like a really weak position. I think it's a really like stupid weak position to like be religiously against the gender stuff. In my view, I think you should be against it because like it's just demonstrably, scientifically, empirically bad for the children.
Not just
like
that,
against
but
their rights.
it always involves mutilation in some way, shape, or form, and psychological abuse and chemical dependence. And,
that's why I think like the religious argument for like why you shouldn't do the trans thing is just it's actually unhelpful. But
you were converted to this Asinu gender, this third gender, you would be serving the goddess Ishtar probably in a ritual sex working job in the temple precincts.
Yeah.
And so we don't know a lot about this exactly because the literature is pretty scant. But I think what's interesting, again, from a material history and a gender studies study of this, is that the only attestation we have of a certain third gender with its own kind of grammar. The grammar here actually means womb person, but womb person is in the masculine gender ending in Akkadian. So clearly, womb is associated with female people, whereas the word here is asinu. They're clearly making it a gender bending category. And you could have your gender, typically men. I don't know if there's any cases of women being assigned to be Asinu, but men prophets could be shifted to the Asinu gender. So if you're curious about that, FYI, there's a great study of that by the SBL called Prophets Male and Female. I can put it in the chat later. That is the most extensive study of this, the role of gender and the Asinu gender in ancient Near East prophecy. We only know of one Canaanite non-Israelite prophet, and that is Balaam, son of Beor, who you may know from the Torah. He's also attested in another place outside of the Bible. He's attested in a shrine that there's the wall was plastered, and he's mentioned on the
we just got a power chat from Owls Are Cool. I was circumcised when I was young, and the stupid doctor botched it up. Anyways, so I had to get surgery later in life. So yeah, fuck circumcision. One step to domesticating us, take us away from our incestual animistic face. Yep, I tend to agree with that. That sucks, bro. That sucks.
That's hardcore. And why is it always that men are trying to be women? In this, it's always, I mean, even in this, it was a womb holder, but with a male. He was just saying in the linguistics was a male suffix, I think he was saying. But it's always, why is it always going that direction? It's very
Well, that's
I
a
have
good
my
question.
I have my theories, but it just seems, and even in today's society, it seems like it's more boys
Oh
wanting
no no
to.
no 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 no. I disagree with that last part about today's society. But like, so Amalek, do you have any thoughts about why like it was always men trying to be women?
They're just gay.
They're just gay.
They're
Probably
just
true.
gay, and
Probably true.
they're just in denial. I don't know. It probably has something to do. If I had to guess, like I had to like gun to my head guess what's the function is here. The function is likely that embryos start basically female,
Yeah.
right, and then they become male. And
Oh.
it's likely that there's some sort of process there, whether it's genetic, environmental, like I know whether it's like, oh, if you eat this thing on that, like whatever the function is, doesn't really matter. But there's something going on in the process there is what I would likely say.
Yeah, I can confirm that. You just reminded me of something. Continue, and I'll tell you.
Yeah, I would say like so when that happens, right? So by that nature, there's just going to be men that have this issue, right? Because it's so many men, right. Like if there's a botched transition from like in the embryo of female to male or whatever, for that interaction to happen, then just by that nature, you're gonna have like more like gay men, right? Or like sexually weird gender men.
There's a study, just reminded me of a study that came out about fetal development and how a woman's body, for some reason, will tend to view the baby as an intrusive. So it wants to kind of attack that fetus. And in order to survive as a survival mechanism, if they exude more of a feminine hormone or the feminine, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but we'll just say a hormone or chemical or something. If the fetus appears more feminine, if it's a boy, the woman's body will accept it more. So like girl babies are fine, obviously, because they have the same jive, but male babies, they have to kind of come off. They have to trick the mother's body that they're more feminine. And then, and that happens, I want to say it's the more pregnancies a woman has, the more the body tends to attack. So it's not saying this is a true statistic, but I think they were saying statistically it's the younger males of families that tend to be gay or trans than the older males of the families. So I don't know. It was a really fascinating read. Yeah.
Master of the wall, and he's mentioned in a non-Israelite language. I think it's Moabite. And so he must have existed and been quite famous. In fact, he's the only prophet from the ancient Canaanite world attested outside of the Bible. So he was famous enough that the Bible had to include him, and he was so famous that he was also attested outside of the Bible as well. However, no non-Israelite Canaanite prophetic texts survived.
Yes.
If they existed, which they very well did, they very well likely did.
We just saw Amalek's O-face.
The reason for that might be that they were written down on papyrus and simply didn't get copied because of
it's because they're
the
fake.
Eventual supremacy
They
of
didn't
the Israelites
exist,
and Yahwism.
dude.
We're so close. We're so
knows.
close.
He
We're
knows.
so close.
Dude, this is what I talk about. That it's a fraud. This is it right here, guys. Everyone pay attention. There's nothing, guys. There's nothing. We're basically taking them at their word for it. 1,000 years after the fact.
Yep.
Pinky swear, trust us, bro.
Yep.
God told us the land is ours. Trust us.
But we do not have records of prophets, non-Israelite prophets, leaving behind a literary record. Unlike, I should mention this text that is on the screen here. This is probably one of the most important ancient Near Eastern religious texts. This is called The Descent of Ishtar. This is a tale where Ishtar descends into the underworld. If you've never read it before, I highly encourage you to take a look at it. It is a description of Ishtar going into the underworld and ultimately becoming trapped there and having to escape. And it's a really fascinating text about Ishtar's journey to the underworld. Many religions have journey to the underworld motifs. Christianity, for instance, has a pretty famous journey to the underworld. Orpheus in the Greek legends. So this journey to the underworld business is a pretty typical religious literature. And the journey to Ishtar is especially really wonderful to read, especially if you want to read, again, prophetic literature and religious literature from the ancient world in which women are the central focus, unlike in Israelite mythology where It's all dudes all the time. For
Sausage party.
What we have in Israelite
That's a little
prophecy
unfair.
is
That's a little
very
unfair.
complicated.
Why is that unfair?
I mean, it's obviously male centric in the Bible. It's obvious. Like obviously, I
Yeah.
wouldn't disagree with that. But there's several, I would say, in the Old Testament, like female main character type figures. So,
That's true.
In the
actually.
Bible, you mean like all of Ruth and Esther, and of
yeah,
course, there's like all both of them.
Well, I'm not like I said. I wouldn't deny that. He's just saying it's just a sausage fest or whatever. I don't think it's
That was
necessarily
me
that.
saying that. Yeah. No, it's as far as like who rituals and gods and deities, it all turned into masculinity. And occasionally we had Ruth and Esther and then Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene and Eve, but Eve is responsible for half of the world's sin and shame, or all of the world's sin and shame. So I mean,
I would definitely say
I would
that
call that male-centric.
Well, I would say Abrahamism definitely removes whatever you would say the divine feminine, I guess is the term you would use to describe what I'm describing.
Sure.
So I wouldn't deny that. I'm just thinking about all the characters in the Bible, and there's a lot of Jewish women. Is basically what I'm thinking of. That's all.
They get 2 or 4, and it's I don't know. Sorry, I'm just
okay.
I'm nipping you now.
Right.
State of affairs. Very complicated state of affairs. Prophecy was a core component of ancient Israelite society. We know of hundreds of prophets from the ancient Israelite world. And when you put that into a sort of material cultural analysis, what that means is that Yahweh was perceived as basically being in constant contact with people. That is to say, you could kind of go down the street and there'd be a prophet in your village, very likely. And if you needed to get in contact with Yahweh, you could probably get into contact with Yahweh, Yahweh at Yahweh.com.
Yahweh.com.
And so prophecy was widely attested. So first thing that we know is that prophets occurred in both genders. We have both women and men prophets. And in fact, the oldest literature attested in the Hebrew Bible are both prophetic pieces of literature from women, specifically attributed to Devorah and Miriam. As you may know, the Song of the Sea and the Song of Devorah, which is found in the book of Judges, are probably the oldest pieces of the Hebrew Bible. They are so old that there's no definite article yet in Hebrew, right? They are very old, probably dating back to the Bronze Age. And what we think is that at this period, both of these prophetic pieces of literature, the Song of the Sea and the Song of Devorah, are what we call warband prophecy. Warband prophecy was a very common form of prophecy all throughout the world, in which a prophet had contact with their God and they would give advice specifically about military matters. And usually what would happen is you would consult the prophet about military matters, and then after you won, assuming you did, the prophet would sing your praises as having won on behalf of the God. And that's exactly what we have in the Song of Devorah and in the Song of Miriam. The Song of Devorah probably is a very early, probably Bronze Age or very early Iron Age account of a tribal conflict in which one group of people killed the other, right? This is also the story of Yael driving a tent spike through a dude's head, which is metal. And so, tent spikes through skulls. That's the thing. And if you read the Devorah account, especially in Hebrew, it is very archaic. And of course, the Miriam story also probably is a memory of some kind of skirmish that occurred in ancient Egypt, where the Israelites were able to escape or at least defeat the Egyptians in that case. So I think just what's interesting about this is that the earliest pieces of literature we have from the ancient Israelites that survive are mystical literature. They're accounts of the God speaking, and they're accounts of the God speaking to women in both cases. This may indicate, and again, we only have 2 pieces of evidence here, this may indicate that women served a unique role in very, very archaic Israelite prophecy. It may have been the case that because they were accepted from battle, that they were allowed to talk to God about the battle, or it may be the case that they had, for whatever reason, thought of as some extra kind of connection to Yahweh. We just don't know. We have no idea. And it's conspicuous that this earliest pieces of literature are both attested to women. We also have independent prophets. I like to call them freelance prophets. Those are people that basically go around condemning people for everything. Those prophets that you probably know are famous people like Amos, who is very famous for condemning the social practices of the ancient Israelites, specifically their excesses, being very wealthy. Amos is probably the most social justice-y, warrior-y guy of the Hebrew Bible. He really dislikes the fact that that the Israelites are so wealthy and they use their wealth to oppress poor people. If you've ever read that great section on Yom
Holy
Kippur,
shit.
Never do
Yeah, it's
that.
true.
Exactly like today. It's exactly the same thing.
It's funny. That's funny. He's totally right. That's exactly how it reads.
right, where it says, "This is the fast I want. I don't want you fasting from food and water. I want you fasting from all kinds of social injustice." That's Amos, right? And so those pieces that are really big in our tradition, I think, as more progressive people, come from the prophet Amos. So he was an independent social critic. We also know that the Israelite state employed hundreds of prophets, hundreds. We have at least two different cases where ancient Israelite kings would have hundreds of prophets in their employ, and those hundreds of prophets would go into ecstatic states. They would often act out their prophecy. So, for instance, if you thought that the king would be gored by an enemy, it's not uncommon that the prophets would actually have gore, like horns made of iron, and they would dance around with the horns of iron in a very theatrical way, it seems, and that these theatrical shows where prophecy, ecstatic states, and theater really meshed together in ancient Israelite society. So we do know that the Israelite state, like the ancient Neo-Assyrian state, employed a huge number of prophets. It also seems like, by the way, FYI, that
real quick, think
unlike
about
other
that.
ancient
The
Near Eastern
government
peoples,
employed
Go
these
ahead.
people. The government
That's
employed these
crazy.
people. Think about this. Think about this. What does that remind you of today? Government employees going around teaching social justice,
Yep. Yeah, nothing has really changed.
More
and they're
things change,
Jewish.
more they stay
So
the
Jewish
same.
guys. So Jewish guys teaching teaching all the people to give up their wealth. It's just. And then people think
Required.
I'm crazy for like showing the parallels or whatever. Oh no, it's just only sucked for the last 100 years. People tell me. Okay.
No, it's always been like this.
Israelites did not rely on astrology. The ancient Assyrians, ancient Babylonians had developed a very, very sophisticated form of
See, relying on astrology makes a lot more sense than relying on fucking DEI training and communism. I'm just saying.
astrology. The ancient Israelites rejected it for reasons that aren't clear. And they rejected it not because they knew better. It wasn't like the ancient Israelites somehow knew that astrology was wrong. It's probably just that they were jealous and they didn't have as sophisticated math.
There's not probably there, by the way.
The ancient Israelites
We
do
have-
not like.
Sorry.
What'd you say?
That's not a probably. We have the writings of them basically like writing and coping. Like, well, wait, how do we deal with these astrology like becoming true? Like, how do we deal with that? Like, oh, the other
No
priests that were using
way.
astrology, they predicted this eclipse. Like, we didn't get to predict the eclipse. Like, it's like ancient writings of them seething about astrology, and that comes forward even further in their writings when they're talking about the Greeks and the Egyptians who basically believe in the globe Earth. And at the time, a lot of Jews believed in basically a version of flat Earth.
Flat earthers.
So it's like dialectic. We have the dialectics or the arguments between the rabbis arguing how to mesh in the globe Earth or whatever into their theology or whatever. And like it does win out pretty early on, so like people can go back and be like, oh no, they thought that the world was always, or they thought the world was round for X amount of years. I know what I'm saying is they got that from the Egyptians and Greeks, and the earlier tradition was what would be called a firmament model.
It's like it feels like they're just like the ultimate scammers of history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that like to separate the idea of what a scammer is from the category of religion is to be like a naive person.
Yeah, I agree.
The idea of astrology, rather a direct contact with their God. All things told, none of them were terribly reliable when it came to predicting the future. They all got destroyed by somebody.
Not true, but
and none of them saw it coming. We also know that there
because that's not how astrology works, you retard.
were roaming prophetic bands. These are sort of prophets that sort of roamed around the countryside. We know they had leaders. Samuel was a leader of such an band of roaming prophets. And we also know that they would roam around and they would play music and they would dance. Again, this is more dancing and music were attested in ancient Israel. One of my things I really miss is that we have no idea what any of this music would have sounded like. My idea is that it was always like some great metal or something. But we have no idea what their music sounded like. We have some vague ideas what the instruments were. And we do know that, for instance, the king Saul, the first Israelite king, came in contact with one of these roaming bands of ancient Israelite prophets, and he also immediately fell into an ecstatic state. So it seems like going into ecstatic states was a thing that was, I don't want to say normal, but normalized. It was a thing that could be expected to happen. So these bands would come through your town, and you might go into an ecstatic state and commune with Yahweh. We do know of several women who were engaged in prophecy, and they had, in some cases, very high rankings in society. One thinks of the prophetess Huldah. Huldah is primarily known from the book of Kings, where the king Josiah, the Judahite king Josiah, finds a Torah scroll in a wall, has it written down to justify his political agenda, and which is the Torah we still have, by the way. Like, it basically is a piece of political propaganda from the 6th century BCE, which no one talks about that. That's the thing.
Wrong, 2nd century.
Huldah is actually
what would he get wrong? What did he say?
He's coping. It's not 6th century, it's 2nd century or 1st century BCE, just so we are very clear. So
why is that a cope?
Well, we have no record. Basically, like, he's talking about like what were called like the reforms of Josiah, and essentially like if you read Origins of Judaism by Jonathan Adler, who's another Jew, he explains that we have like no record of Judaism before the 2nd century BCE. And what he basically argues is like that what we have now, like the Torah observant Jews and like what they believe now and how they are, that didn't come until around that time, and that all of the other stuff is basically like cope. And what happened they were reforms around the time of the Hasmonean dynasty that were brought about in the Jewish religion, right? To basically like they had a new dynasty. And then they're like, okay, well, now we got to like smooth out all the edges of our religion because it's such a crazy, hodgepodge of religion. So basically, they formalized it, made it into dogmatic stuff or whatever. And like that is where we first see what we now know as Judaism. And that's all like that whole argument is laid out in Origins of Judaism or whatever.
There's a great question that you're really gonna love in the chat. So new to learning what y'all are watching, do they even believe Jesus was on this earth? I mean, they literally found artifacts that are written talking about Jesus.
Yeah, I'm not gonna freak out. That's just like that's my wheelhouse, right? I'll just say this to that person that asked that question. That's like what I kind of study or whatever, as I guess you could say, like Jesus mythicism. Adam Green has a book and it's coming out like any day now, very soon. Like the finishing touches. No, it's done. I mean, I've seen it.
You've seen it? Cool.
I've been helped. Yeah, it's done. It just has to like go through maybe 1 or 2 more reviews on like 2 or 3 more chapters maybe, but it's done. And it goes over the whole argument of Jesus mythicism from like I would say a good perspective. However, if you go to Twitter and you go to More Amalek is my name on Twitter, Need More Amalek, but it's More _Amalek. And if you go there and you go to the highlight section and you scroll down, there's a book called Nailed, and you should listen to it. It's an audiobook. It's only 4.5 hours long, and it goes over what actual evidence we have for Jesus. And I'll just say, like, there is no like archaeological evidence of, or however that was phrased, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's not real.
A woman prophet who is an immigrant, a refugee from the north. She's living in a suburb of Jerusalem, and she's consulted to basically vet whether or not this scroll found in the wall is true. And of course, she does the very wise thing and says that it is, because Yeah, I'm sure her neck was on the line. So we do know that women had a relatively high-ranking position of power as prophets. They were not allowed to be priests, but they were allowed to be prophets, and they could do things as high level as basically vet scripture. And again, I want to restate that just so folks hear it. This is a woman vetting the legitimacy of the Bible. That is enormously important in the history of Judaism and in the history of religion, I think more generally, considering how completely excluded women are on almost every level in this historical thing. The ancient Israelites vetted scripture, vetted the Torah almost as we know it, at least the book of Deuteronomy, by a woman. All right, the woman Huldah. We know virtually nothing about her, but clearly she was considered to be in contact with Yahweh, and at least for perhaps political reasons, vetted some sections of the Bible as we know them. We also know that there were professional prophets, that is to say, prophets whose job it was to be a prophet. You got paid. I don't know.
I want to get paid
got
to
a
be a
9-to-5
prophet.
job, and you were a prophet. I hope they had a prophet union. I don't know that they did, but local prophet one number 95. But they had professional prophets that existed. We also know of non-professional prophets. Sometimes they're called Ish Elohim, men of God. And these were often associated also with miracle working and what may be better described as magic. These would be folks like Elijah and Elisha, who the only accounts of people being resurrected from the dead in the entire Hebrew Bible are both associated with Elijah and Elisha. And so on the one hand, they represented God mostly in divine duels. As you may know, many Israelites and other Canaanite people worshipped a god called Baal, who was very popular.
Literally
as
like
a
Harry
storm
Potter
god,
duels.
because
Not
as
even
you may
kidding.
know,
What do you, how
if
is
you
it like
read the
Harry
descriptions
Potter
of the
duels?
duels, if you read the descriptions of the duels that he's talking about, and you read how they work, and you put them side by side with Harry Potter duels, they are word for word, almost identical. Sometimes the Harry Potter duels in the Bible, or that he's talking about, are in the sky. But generally speaking, like, yeah, that's what's going on. They literally have like magic duels where one turns the other staff into a snake, and then the other one shoots a fireball out of their staff, and it's literally just Harry Potter. It's Harry Potter duels. It's awesome.
Storms are very rare in ancient Israel, and you relied on winter rains basically to make sure that you had agricultural crops. And so storms were a godsend, and Baal was very popular. Well, just like on the middle school playground of your childhood, people fought each other to show how cool they were, and so did the gods. And so what we know most famously about Elijah was Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to a duel and subsequently murdered them all by cutting their heads off when they lost the duel. If that rings of Al-Qaeda or Daesh to you, yes, this is a brutal world. And whether the story happened or not, we don't know. But the fact that the Israelite writer that recorded it relished in it at least meant that they wanted it to have happened, whether it really happened or not. So we also have prophetic duels, my God can beat up your God kind of situation where they would engage in these prophetic duels, which if you've never read that story in the Book of Kings, it is really worth reading. Elijah was a weird dude. He's on the fringes of society. It's not even clear he's even an Israelite. He's constantly called a Tishbite, right? And so as a Tishbite, he may have not even been born an Israelite. He's a kind of fringe character that people have a very strange relationship with, and we continue to have a strange relationship with him because he didn't die, allegedly, and now we invite him into our homes randomly. So just remember, right, when you invite him into your home, that he did cut off the head, allegedly, of like 500 people one time. So be careful who you invite into your home. This guy's murdered about 500 people. Elijah. We also know that prophets seem to have been both ecstatic and non-ecstatic, which is to say that some of them went into fugue states, we might call them, or ecstatic states to issue their prophecy, and others didn't. So we have a range of prophetic techniques. Unfortunately, what we don't have is any accounts in ancient Israeli literature about how they did this. We know they danced and they played music. Nothing else. And yes, I know some of you are probably wondering, did they do drugs? Probably not. At least if they did, it's not recorded, right? We don't have any attestation of Elijah
But like you don't have to do drugs to get yourself in those states though. Like you can just do like the right breathing exercises and get yourself in those states. It's not really that hard.
Yeah, and I disagree with him a little bit here. I don't think that there's no evidence for it. I just think that all the evidence is like textual based, which means that we're basically like reading into like poetic language, right? So, you know, if I made like a euphemism to you now today that I don't know, like a modern reference, I can't even think of one right now. If I said like "What's up," you know what that's from, right?
Yeah.
What's up? The commercial.
Yeah.
You guys are old enough to remember that, right?
Oh yeah.
If I said that,
No.
I say,
No.
I said "What's
29.
up," right? And everyone here knows what that cultural context is. Imagine 2,000 years, someone like reading that word "What's up," and like, how would you ever explain to them the context of that? Like,
It's like
oh,
one
it
of the
was a
first
commercial
movies.
from the Super Bowl. Oh, what's the Super Bowl? You know what I mean? Like the whole thing,
Yeah.
it wouldn't make sense. And so like that's kind of what we're looking back on when we're reading this stuff. And there's a lot of people who theorize like, oh, when it talks about, you know, eating the crown or there's like talks about lotus stuff, there's like, you know, poetic language talks about, people think that that is a allegory for drug use. So like I agree with what he's saying. The scholarship says that there was nothing like that, but you know, that isn't necessarily like a closed case, I would say.
It could be, as you said,
Yeah,
hidden.
someone said in the chat,
symbolism.
burning bush. That is the perfect example. I think that's a theory
Hmm.
that goes around a lot. Is the burning bush thing. So
Yeah, well, they have to hide things in symbolism because even for today's audiences, they can't appear to have been drugged up dancing Jewish people spitting prophecy. They have to have, they're trying to like be a little, like you said, they're formalizing and they're making it a little more respectable. So, but yeah, and I mean, you don't need drugs to get into that state, but it's a lot more fun.
It is, but well, I mean, I don't know. Like when I was really like doing all of the ceremonies and stuff, I could get myself into the same state that I was in on ayahuasca, just by doing deep breathing exercises and just really like, you know, sinking into like meditation.
Right on.
I can't do that today because I'm out of practice with it, but like you can do it.
Right.
there's like a whole field of study that I would say of like Jew, like it's almost like he doesn't like this field of Jews or the group of Jews who think that there was like a large amount of drug use going on, or not just Jews that study this, but just scholars and Jewish people, like people who study this topic. There's like a whole field of like linking drugs to like the ancient rituals, and then there's like basically I would say probably like a dozen books on this. So if you think that that's like a viable theory, you should look into that and try to debunk it yourself. Like I said, I would never say that. He articulated the proper thing, but I don't think it's a close case, like I said.
Yeah, and I don't think it has anything to do with drinking wine, because drinking wine does not put you into that. Drinking wine is actually counterproductive to what he's talking about.
Well, we do have Christian literature later talking about putting things into the wine that we're pretty sure was some sort of, it was either drugs or it was like some sort of spiking of the wine was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Ate some mushrooms and then went to town, or smoked some weed or whatever, or even drank alcohol. Many of the prophets are actually sworn off of alcohol as part of their prophetic vocation. So we don't have much evidence of substance use in the prophetic literature. However, archaeology is a hell of a drug. And what we recently found at a site called Tel Arad, which is one of the few Yahweh shrines to survive from the ancient world, we found on the top of one of the altars where you burned incense, cannabinoids. And so we know that room, right, would have been relatively small. And if they were burning incense with cannabinoids in it,
I told you
they were smoking.
They were hotboxing.
Maybe smoking weed.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But we found it. We found evidence of cannabinoids at a Yahweh shrine, right? One of the only ones that survives. There are only two that survive. There's one at Tel Arad and there's one at Tel Dan. The Jerusalem one has been destroyed. And so the Shiloh one has never been found. But maybe they were getting contact highs, talking to Yahweh. I don't know. I would encourage you to do your experimentation on your own time, see if it works for you. So I do not know. But this, that, by the way, that find about the Tel Arad cannabinoid thing was just like a year ago. So people who think that they've combed over everything over there, they find all kind of weird stuff. So actually, that's not that they found it. They just didn't think to test it. That shrine's been sitting in the Israel Museum for like 30 years. They just didn't test it for some reason. And so some guy scraped it and was like, it's weed in here. So that's the thing. The image on the left-hand side here is from the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is from the Habakkuk Pesher. Pesher is a commentary. This is the first commentary we know of in Judaism. And if you know anything about the history of Judaism, commentaries are our jam. We are a commentary writing people. We love to write. We write things called hyper commentaries, folks. The hyper commentary is a commentary on a commentary on a commentary. That is, commentaries are our jam, and this is the first one. This is a commentary on the prophet Habakkuk. This was recovered from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this is the first time where a prophet, the prophet Habakkuk, is actually being read as a esoteric text. The commentator believes that inside of the prophecy of Habakkuk are secret.
So are the commentaries? Is this just like early blogging? Is this just like
This is literally
I'm gonna
early
give
Talmud.
you my, but they're just like they're giving their opinion about something, right? So it's like they're basically like a drunk uncle at like a family gathering, just like pontificating, and they're putting it in writing and calling it a commentary.
Right.
Okay.
No, it's literally just like what the Talmud later becomes. That's what it is. And the Talmud and the way the data is set up is like a Reddit thread is actually the way I would describe it. If you ever use
A Reddit
Reddit,
thread.
it's
Nice.
set up exactly like that. Yeah. And then hey, real quick, there's somebody in the chat. I was not talking about Yahweh is doing that. I was talking about Gnostics doing that, and I am not an Amen Hillman theorist. That's not what I was referring to. That's not what I was referring to. Anyway, go ahead.
Things that are going to happen in the future. And so if you've ever heard curious people say that they found secret things in the Bible that are describing the future, this is the first guy or person to do this. Is in the Habakkuk Pesher found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can find this document in any collection of the Dead Sea Scrolls. But again, what's important to note here, right, is that even the idea that you can mine a prophetic piece of literature to divine the future, an idea that we all know, it's culturally very common. Again, you just flip on the radio, and I'm sure you can find some preacher right now telling you that the end of the world is coming because they found something in the Bible, the book of Daniel, whatever. The first time we see it actually happen in Israelite literature is in this commentary on Habakkuk. So you could read the book of Habakkuk; it's relatively short, and then you could read the Habakkuk Pesher in the Dead Sea Scrolls and take a look at that one. This is also on display in the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem. People always flock to see the Great Isaiah Scroll because they think that it's the biggest one, But just so you know, if you go to the Shrine of the Book, the Great Isaiah Scroll is a replica. It's not the real one. That one, the real one's stored in a bunker somewhere. But the Habakkuk Pesher is the real one, and no one ever spends any time on it because they just think it's nonsense or they don't care. And I got to spend like an hour looking at it because
That's not true. Tell the real
Pesher.
story. Is he going to tell That's not true.
What is the real story?
Isaiah's visited more because that's where Christianity comes from. That's why it's visited more. Unless he's just talking about Judaism, like Jewish visiting, fine. But the reason everyone goes and visits Isaiah is because Isaiah, or he's saying Isaiah, right? Or that was what he's saying, right? Yeah. The reason everyone goes and visits Isaiah is because that's where they get the Jesus midrash from. He's coping.
So there we have it. As I mentioned, we know basically nothing about the material culture of the ancient prophets aside from the books that get written down. Clearly, the scribes that wrote these books down thought of them as incredibly important and copied them. We know nothing about their practices, their mystical practices, so we don't know anything about their meditation techniques, their breathing techniques, the drugs they may have used or not used. We know very little about how they achieved these mystical states. So reconstructing what they did is very difficult. We also know very little about the phenomenology of this. And phenomenology is a $2 word that means the experience of this. What was it like to be a prophet in ancient Israel? What was it like to experience this ecstatic state? We know very little about it because ancient Israelites, like many ancient cultures, just didn't put as much emphasis on subjectivity that we do. We are a narcissistic people. We love ourselves and we love talking about ourselves.
No kidding.
And you can find 1,000 books about people talking about, we have memoirs and things, right? Ancient peoples did not care about subjectivity in the way that we do. And so and again, think about this from reading the Hebrew Bible. How often do you learn about the emotional states of characters? Basically never. It's like, and he got angry. they were sad and they move on. We know very little about the interiority of these characters because they didn't care about it as a literary motif, right? It's not like Russian romanticism or something. And we know very little about the phenomenology of these experiences, aside from they were apparently very scary. That's it, right? So we know that ancient Israelite prophecy, ancient Israelite mysticism was a social anchor. It was a political anchor. It was an economic anchor. We know that with that many people, 400 prophets employed by a court, this was a part of the economy, right? This was no marginal thing by any stretch of the imagination.
400, think about how crazy it is. 400
it
employees back
from
then, just like a proportion of their population. Think of how crazy that is.
What would that be like roughly like equivalent to today, do you think?
I mean, hold on, let me see. What would have the what would the size of Jerusalem's, what's the population be in the let's just do 6th century. Let's just see in the 6th century here. 10,000 to 20,000 individuals. So
Wow.
400 out of 20,000 is what exactly? I'm not good at math. So 2% of the population overall is employed by the state for just like bringing this stuff around. How crazy is that?
That's crazy, actually.
Imagine if, like, what? How much was there anything equivalent to that in like?
Amazon would be the closest, and I'd even doubt that would even get to up to 2%.
Maybe the IRS.
No, Amazon's the largest employer in the United States for sure.
I
but
know,
like,
I'm being facetious.
I'm like, ask what percentage of the population Amazon employs. Maybe the IRS someday.
Oh shit! In the U.S., I asked the
in
world.
in the U.S. Oh, yeah.
I was like, that's astonishing low. Yeah, Amazon is roughly 0.32% with 1.1 million.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So think about how crazy this is, right? So it's almost like the state and the temple we are now today thinking of these as separate entities, when how you really need to understand them is they were the political entities. Like, it's basically like the nobles or the crown, you could say, that they derive their power from the authority of the temples, especially in the Middle East.
From a material culture point of view, unfortunately. What we do know is that the prophets went away. Israelite prophecy went away eventually. And the reason probably that it went away is that, well, the countries that they served were destroyed. Ancient Israel was destroyed in 722 BCE, and ancient Judah was destroyed in 586. And if your country gets destroyed, well, you don't have a job anymore. If you're alive, right? If you're alive. And we know there were prophets operating in the exile. Ezekiel is one of them. Jeremiah flees into Egypt.
Prophets out of work.
So we do know that they escaped, but we know that the social institution of prophecy did not survive these destructions. So why? Well, it could be a lot of things. One of the reasons it could just be that they got killed, right? You just wipe them out. That's a thing that happened in the ancient world. Another reason why it could be the case is, well, they didn't see it coming. Your whole job is to communicate from Yahweh what's about to happen to us and how we can make this not happen. And they didn't, right? So again, if your astrologer doesn't see the thing coming, well, get a different astrologer. So part of the problem of divination is, if you don't see the big things coming, like your whole country being destroyed, well, that shakes confidence in your ability to communicate for your God.
That's not how it. If you're not asking a specific question that is relevant to the destruction of your country, you're not going to just be like, it's just not. That's not how astrology is not going to say to you, hey, it's Saturday. The sun is in Aries, and that means your country is going to get destroyed. That's not how that fucking works.
Yeah.
It's funny.
We
just has such
know
a
that
very
prophecies weren't
Jewish
terribly
view still
popular.
of astrology, right? Isn't that interesting? Because he describes himself as a post-theist, but he just has a Jewish view of astrology.
Yeah.
I don't. He has his own biases and I have mine or whatever. But it's funny because he clearly hates that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, astrology is not about, okay, my opinion on it is astrology is not about divination. It's not about telling the future. It's about telling the direction the energy is going in. It's about like assessing like what is the path of least resistance? Like where are things going? And if you know where things are going, it can just make life easier to like work with the energy rather than like working against it or whatever. But it's not like it doesn't deliver you, here is what is going to happen to you next week. That's not what it is.
It's not prophetic, it's more guidance, like this is a good time to do this is a bad time to do that. And it's not like no, you're going to wear all red socks next week because that's going to bring you good luck and someone will recognize you and want to meet you because of your red socks. It's not that specific.
It's like don't sign a contract during Mercury retrograde.
Right.
Or things like that. It's not going to tell you, hey, your business is going to blow up if you like next week or whatever. But it's saying like, listen, if you fuck around and you sign a contract during Mercury retrograde, that just might not be the brightest idea you've ever had. It doesn't mean what you're going to do is necessarily definitely going to fail, but you are tempting fate.
Clear in some ways. I mean, no one likes social critics, right? You go ask the social critics. People hate social critics, right? People hate people being like, listen, you're rich and God hates you for it. And God's going to condemn you and God's going to kill people because of your wealth and your religious abandonment, right? No one like wealthy people, powerful people don't like to be told that being wealthy and powerful is evil, right? And they're also the people that kill people to prevent them from saying that. And so prophets often got themselves killed for saying these kinds of things. So it could just be that they were also always at some level, in many ways, a marginalized group. As the political situation in ancient Judah gets increasingly bad, what ends up happening is that prophecy ultimately shifts away from condemning the Israelites to basically saying, well, one day God's going to come and kill all of you people, right? You're not doing the right thing, and God's going to get God's revenge on you. And this becomes a shift to what sometimes is referred to as the Yom Yahweh motif, or the Day of the Lord. When I say Lord, it always makes me feel like I'm a Southern Baptist preacher. But I got to make that "or" really long. The Lord. At any rate, basically what it comes out to is the prophets more or less saying, God's abandoned you. God's going to kill you all. I'm out. Right. And so there's a kind of prophetic frustration that seems to set in, where the prophets are increasingly thinking about a more distant, removed future where God will sort things out because the present is just a nightmare. The Babylonians are destroying everything and things like that. And what ends up happening is that after the Judahite state is destroyed in the 6th century BCE, the prophets basically are done for as an institution. The Judahite prophets vanish. And the prophetic literature as we have it in the Hebrew Bible is codified. Now, that doesn't mean that people stop being weird. People continue being weird. It's just that their weird is a new kind of weird. And that new kind of weird is apocalypticism, right? That new kind of weird is apocalypticism. Now, I know that the word apocalyptic typically has to do with the end of the world. That's not what apocalypticism is going to mean in this case. But, right, what we will do is we'll return next week to talk about the rise of Jewish apocalypticism.
Ooh.
Notice what we haven't talked about much. Angels, demons, the end of the world, the battle between good and evil, right? The Messiah. We haven't talked about any of that yet. And there's a reason for that.
All later.
And the reason for that is the prophets didn't know about any of that stuff. Ancient Israelites didn't really concern themselves with those kinds of things. It's the apocalypticists that do.
Yep.
And so when we get back next week, we'll talk about the rise of people who have visions of angels and demons, people who have visions of the afterlife. The Israelites really didn't believe in an afterlife. They believed in a place called Sheol, which is just sort of a cave-like grave that you went and stayed in forever.
I can let my dog
there's no demons living in there or anything like that. So what we're going to see is a massive innovation in Jewish religion in the aftermath of the end of prophecy, where rather than the prophets speaking to God, right, rather than Yahweh speaking to the prophets, what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a shift from an oral culture, God speaking to the prophets, and the prophets speaking for God. Rather than speaking, God is going to show things to people, right? We're going to switch from a visual culture we're going to switch from an oral culture to a visual culture. And in fact, the word apocalypsis means to reveal. And if you've ever read much in the way of apocalyptic literature, is showing rather than telling, right? Showing rather than, and I saw, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to see a huge shift starting next time with the rise of the apocalyptic. And the apocalyptic is going to bring in the course of a new form of Judaism, and that new form of Judaism is going to be really, really, really weird, with a lot of weird beings and things like that. I will say this, just as we wrap up for tonight: prophetic Judaism did not completely go away. There continued to be prophets from time to time that did speak on behalf of Yahweh. You probably know of one of the more famous ones. His name was Jesus, Josh of Nazareth, as I call him.
Josh.
It's probably the case that Jesus of Nazareth, I mean, Jesus is just the Greek version of Joshua, Josh. He probably thought of himself as speaking on behalf of God. And so these people did emerge, and they did manage to get themselves killed pretty consistently. And what we will also see through the Middle Ages, through the rise of the Middle Ages, is a new form of prophetic Kabbalah, where Abraham Abulafia will actually develop the first techniques, mystical techniques, for getting a vision of God. And we actually have those techniques. They're breathing techniques and meditation techniques. And we'll talk about some of those techniques as we get into the rise of Kabbalah. So prophecy has not completely gone away, but it has a kind of, I think, a kind of half-life, that as an institution, it passed away, but it has a half-life, and there continue to be prophets from time to time in Judaism. They also continue to have a pretty bad life. Abraham Abulafia was excommunicated, condemned, and died in obscurity. So I don't recommend, if you want to be happy, don't be a prophet. And if you want to make others happy.
Yeah, so real, actually.
No kidding.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining me.
Okay, that is the end of episode 1. Now, we had talked last time about continuing into episode 2. Do we still want to do that? You guys up for?
This is where it gets into oh, sorry, Emma. Like, it gets into the apocalyptic doomsdayer version of this, and it's going to make a lot of sense about where we are now, and also how it influenced Christianity and like a lot of other religions. As soon as the Jews went to doomsday, everybody went doomsday. So
she's so right. And where the Jews got this from, this apocalyptic stuff, is it's heavily influenced by Zoroastrianism, is where a lot of it comes from. So they're basically like taking like a Zoroastrian concept, and then they're really iterating on it. I mean, they're really, really into this whole concept of like the battle in the heavens and all this other stuff. I stepped out for a second, and I heard him say something along the lines of, where there's no angels, there's no this or there's no that. Some of that starts coming later in like the Book of Enoch and all this later literature, where they start like adding on through what I would call like a science fiction genre back then. You know what I mean?
The host of heaven.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely I want to watch the next one. I was thinking about this the other day, Karlyn. Do you remember that I recommend people watch this series before in the Spaces? Because of what the next part is. This first part's good and it's a good intro or whatever. But this second part right here that we're about to watch, she's so right. Like this is incredibly important to understand. First of all, the Jesus and the Christian stuff and all that stuff, but really understanding the politics, the geopolitical stuff that's going on right now, is directly linked to these, ancient prophecies or whatever that he's going to go over.
Oh yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's continue into part 2. Fast forward. Jump ahead.
Mysticism and Kabbalah.
Well, I want to say welcome back. Welcome back this evening to the second part of our 10-session romp through Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah. And as we talked about last time, right, and Kabbalah, right, we're still 1,200 years away from Kabbalah. It's still way off in the distance. So we're still very much in the time period right around the turn of the Common Era. That is to say, around the year 0, right? That's if you want to get an anchor of where we are. And just to recap a bit, right? Just to recap a little bit from last time to sort of see where we are in the lay of the land. We defined mysticism, at least for the purposes of this class, which doing things like defining mysticism makes it certain that everybody will disagree with you that studies this stuff. So I'm just basically, anytime I say, I'm going to define mysticism, it's like putting a target on my back. But the way that I want to define it is as a non-rational mode in which one experiences or learns about fundamental reality, and also the traditions that accrue around those experiences. So I would say, I would call someone, for instance, that studies mysticism for the idea that those mystics learned fundamental truths, even though perhaps that person themselves didn't have those experiences, I would also consider that person a mystic. So I would say that there's also the idea that you lean on the mystics to learn what they learned, and that puts you in the tradition of folks who are in fact mystics. And there's an entire tradition in Judaism of what we'll call intellectual mystics. We'll get to those much later. And intellectual mystics are those that say, look, I never had this experience, but I trust that this person did, and I think that they're fundamentally right. So that's also, I think, another form of mysticism that actually doesn't involve mystical experiences. And as I mentioned last time, the first Jewish mystics weren't even Jewish. The first Jewish mystics were Israelites, which is a much broader category. Remember that the Jews received that name, the Yehudim received that name as being the descendants of one of the tribes that comprise the 12 tribes of Israel. And so Jewish mystics actually make up a minority of this. Many of the prophets we have in the Hebrew Bible are from all over. They're not necessarily Judahites. And we said that the two forms of mysticism that seem to have been prevalent in Israelite society at that time were folks who experienced theophany, that is to say, God showed up to them, God appeared to them. And on the other hand, for other people, God spoke to them. And if you speak on the behalf of God, that makes you a navi, a prophet. Although sometimes those folks are referred to as ro'eh, as seers. But the idea there is that we have the idea that either those folks can see the future or they hear something from God and they communicate that to other people. And those folks we typically refer to as the prophets. And the most important theophanies in the Hebrew Bible, historically speaking at least, we don't think that the theophany described in Exodus, where God showed up to the Israelites and to Moses, we're fairly confident that that's a mythological piece of information, not a historical one. But we are relatively confident, many scholars are relatively confident, that the prophets Isaiah and Ezekiel did have some kind of phenomenological encounter, and that encounter they recorded in the literature of the book of Isaiah and the book of Ezekiel, respectively. Now, the idea that, now you might be wondering, right, how can you say that Moses didn't exist? Well, it's not about whether he did or didn't, it's about what we have evidence for. And we just don't have evidence really to believe that that happened, but we have pretty good evidence to believe that the experiences of Isaiah and Ezekiel were in fact recorded. And as we talked about last time, prophecy is very well attested all over the ancient Near East, with the weird exception of Egypt. Egypt is kind of prophet-free, which, all things being equal, sounds great. I wouldn't want to live anywhere. I don't want any prophets in my neighborhood. I don't want any guy walking down my street screaming at people because they're like, woe to the disbelievers, Yahweh is going to kill you all. I'm like, I'm going to call the cops on you again. So I don't want to live anywhere near prophets. And so Egypt seems like a pretty great place to be prophet-free. But at any rate, we saw last time that there are a great deal of prophets that live all through the ancient Near East, and especially in the Neo-Assyrian context, which tracks very carefully, very temporally to the ancient Israelite context. And so we actually know a good deal about those ancient Near East prophets. We also know that one of the things that happened in the ancient Near Eastern world were prophetic duels. They just didn't take prophets' words for granted because they kind of seemed crazy. And if they seemed crazy to you, they seemed kind of crazy to people back then too, right? Just because you see Jesus in your toast doesn't mean Jesus is in your toast. It might be that you might need help. And so many people in the ancient world also thought, right, this guy's just drunk, right? And there's many cases in the Bible where people do prophecy and other people are like, yeah, they're drunk. And so this was an idea.
Very
and so we see
entertaining
other
and
ancient
cute.
Near East cultures engaging in prophecy and other mechanisms by which to detect whether a prophecy is reliable or duels between prophets to establish which prophets are actually telling the truth. Prophetic duels needs to be a video game. Just saying.
Yeah, real actually.
It's a fighting game, but with prophets. And what brings prophecy to an end and what sets us up for our transition to tonight is that, as you might remember, part of what happens in the theophany literature of the Hebrew Bible is that the God of the Israelites, Yahweh, makes themselves known by revealing a bunch of very inconvenient rules. And by revealing all these very inconvenient rules, the idea is that the Israelites are bound to follow those rules, and Yahweh will protect them and give them land and provide for them to have large families and agricultural surplus. Well, what ends up happening is that for various reasons, the Israelite state is destroyed and the Judean state is destroyed. And as you might imagine, when your entire theology is founded on a vassal contract, right? And your vassal, the person who justifies your vassal relationship, gets defeated, well, that's the end of that.
It's not a good
And
look.
so again, it's like if you're living in a house and your landlord gets bought out by, I don't know, some sketchy investment firm, well, you got a new landlord. You have no longer a relationship with old landlord. Well, now you got to deal with other gods. And so the Israelites have some pretty complicated problems in their hands. And the pretty complicated problem on their hand is we've predicated an entire theology on one system.
Hey, yo, bro. None of this, no more of this shit in the chat. Like this is a chill night. We're having a chill stream. We're watching, we're asking questions, we're learning. You don't get to be a belligerent asshole in our chat, okay? Don't fucking ruin our show just because you're having feelings. If you don't shut the fuck up or chill out, I'm just gonna end up banning you because I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. Amalek's been very nice to engage with you in the chat, and you just keep being a fucking asshole. So chill.
And it didn't work. Our God seems like either got us defeated or we're defeated, and what now, right? What do you do now with the awkward relationship with your former landlord? And so what's going to happen is that prophecy, the idea that there are people speaking on behalf of Yahweh, what's going to happen is that's going to increasingly go away, right? And a new form of religiosity is going to emerge. And that new form of religiosity that's going to emerge is going to be a new kind of mysticism. And that new kind of mysticism is what scholars typically refer to as the apocalyptic. All right, Tanakh pop quiz. I bet you know this was coming. So Tanakh pop quiz, and this is a trick question because of course it is. You're in a class about mysticism. Does anyone here know, and feel free to put it in the chat, where in the Tanakh are the events surrounding the Hanukkah story recorded?
They are not anywhere.
So I see Ashley say
Maccabees,
they're not.
which is not in there.
Not in there.
Answer that's the less wrong answer.
The trick question.
You're certainly right. They're not recorded straightforwardly. Anyone know where the events of the Hanukkah story are actually depicted in the Tanakh? Not in the Apocrypha, like in the book of Maccabees, where they're literally described, but in Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament, as you may know it. Everybody's like, why you ask me damn questions like this? I'm the one taking this class, right? So Ashley, you are right. It is not described transparently in Tanakh. It is, however, described encodedly.
Everything's encoded.
It is actually encoded in the book of Daniel. Now, the book of Daniel was probably the least read Jewish book in the Hebrew Bible. It's in some ways one of the most confusing. But historical scholars of the Hebrew Bible, scholars of the book of Daniel, are fairly confident that encoded in a very elaborate system of symbols, the story of the conquest of Syria, Judea by Alexander the Great, the civil wars between his generals that led to the various empires like the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, also with the rise of the Romans and the period of the Maccabean Rebellion, are in fact described using coded language in the book of Daniel in chapters 7 through 12. If you've never read the book of Daniel, it's a very weird book. And by the way, it's one of the few books in the Hebrew Bible that actually has extensive sections actually written in Aramaic. In chapters 7 through 12, there is a section that is encoded using a very elaborate system of symbols that describes all the things I just put out. Now, what's very interesting about this section of the book of Daniel is that the writer, whoever's writing it, is describing the very beginning of the Maccabean rebellion, right? But they never describe the end of it. Now, that leaves an open question. Why don't they describe the eventual
This is what I was talking about
success of the
earlier about
Maccabeans?
the
And they're very
Hasmonean
pro-Maccabean,
dynasty
at least-
and all this other stuff.
They're kind of tempered on the Maccabeans, actually, which a lot of people were because they were terrifying to anyone that wasn't a religious zealot.
Part of it, anyway.
Everybody in this class will be killed by the Maccabees, just FYI. Everybody. They would have gladly killed all of us for being like not them. which is always weird about Hanukkah. Hanukkah's a complicated idea if you're a progressive, liberal-minded Jewish person, because they're like, yeah, I'm celebrating the very people that would have literally, like Taliban, like the Taliban of Judaism. At any rate, we don't know why they don't finish. We don't know. They may have just died. You know, it was a war, and the Maccabees didn't like people who could, I don't know, read. And so they may have just got killed. It may have just gotten killed. And so we don't see the end of it. But what's interesting about it is we now have a really good idea about when the book was written, at least those sections. They were written sometimes after the Maccabean revolt began, but before it ended. So we know it began around 160 and it concluded around 167 BCE.
And hold on, real quick.
We
Just
have a
think
good
about this.
idea about where that section of Daniel.
Go ahead.
Just like to put into perspective where we're talking about in the world. We're talking about the 160s BCE. That is after, like, think about this. The Greek world has conquered Alexander the Great. All this has happened. His empire fell. His generals took over. The Greek is the lingua franca, is the term we use today for this. Everyone's speaking Greek. They would have known all the Greek stories. So the fact that now are the later Torah or Hebrew Bible stories or whatever, however you want to phrase that those in a lot of ways mirror Greek stories isn't like an accident. That didn't happen like, oh, it just so happens to be that Samson and Hercules are similar. No, they are pulling from those sources to create those narratives. And in a lot of ways, the Jewish version of the stories are dialectics against the pagan version. So like the moral of the story from the Jewish one is actually like a counter narrative against the moral of the story of the pagan one. And so it's almost like you had dueling like writers or dueling, wizards or whatever, however you would describe this, arguing kind of over these concepts this way.
Makes sense.
Well, and everybody trying to claim, no, it's our original idea. No, it's not. We came up with it first. No, this is our story. And just to try get believers and people on their side.
Yeah, and then none of this is original. It's all pulling from each other, basically, is the lesson there.
Oh yeah.
When it was written down. Now, why would people encode things in strange language? Why would people encode things in weird symbols? Well, because it's a new kind of literature emerging, a new kind of religiosity emerging in the aftermath of the demise of the prophetic period. And that new kind of religiosity is what we call apocalypticism. Also, by the way, describing current events as if they're taking place far in the future is what we call in the literature ex eventu prophecy. The vast majority of historical prophets did not predict the future. We'll talk more about the ones that tried and failed in a minute. But the vast majority of prophets who describe all kinds of weird things, and I'm sure folks have read some sections from the book of Daniel or the book of Revelations written by St. John. Or Nostradamus, right? If folks have read any Nostradamus, it's always weird stuff like an eagle comes from the east and attacks the great bear, and the bear follows the sun, and the sun turns to blood, and you're like, what in the hell are you talking about? They're not describing the future. They're actually describing the present using encoded language, right? This is what we call ex eventu prophecy. They're describing things that have happened using codes. Why would they do that? Well, because it might be politically expedient to be a little cryptic, right? Because again,
hold on.
One of the things that
I don't know if he's going to say this, but
criticize.
Go ahead.
The other thing is we're reading texts that would have been for the priest class.
Yeah,
it's like we're reading their zines, right? Right?
Yes.
That's what it's kind of like. So the fact that there's like encoded language in there, obviously, like the whole thing that you're doing is like decoding language, right? That's what they were doing. Yeah.
I don't know if that's depressing or what that is. It's kind of depressing.
Well, this is what I try to tell you, that like what you do is very similar to deconstructing religion. It's a very interesting thing. Yeah.
It is. Well, I mean, like, because the left is like a cult. It's like a religious belief, and they pull more people into the cult. So it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
The standard order of things. And do you really want to be the person living in the Roman Empire being like, the Romans suck and I hate them and God's going to kill them all soon? You want to publish that? You don't want to publish that because they'll crucify you for it. So what do you write? Well, the Kittim right, will arise from the sea and then blah, 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 right? You encode it. And the encoding mechanism is part of the apocalyptic literature. So what isn't apocalyptic? That's the first thing we need to do. I know, right, that when most people hear the word apocalypticism, they're thinking end of the world. They're thinking all the crazy stuff happens at the end of the world. The Messiah is going to come, and there's going to be this and that, and the battle of Gog and Magog, and there's going to be all this stuff that happens at the end of the world, the battle of Megiddo, whatever. And so many people typically imagine that what apocalypticism is about the future, because the word apocalypticism has been filtered so heavily through Christianity, and Christianity does tend to think of the apocalypse as like something happening in the future, although early Christians thought it was going to happen pretty soon in their lifetime. Jesus is kind of dragging his feet, but they really thought it was going to happen soon. And this idea that it's going to happen in the future is an idea really from Christianity that has sort of shadowed and flavored the way that we use this word.
Pause. Dude, oh my God. I just realized this. I never realized, so I've like, you know, told people like watch this series before in space and stuff like that. And there's like these people who follow me around who just really hate me because they are Christian, like their Christian identity, white Hebrew Israelites, and I drive them nuts. And they follow me around everywhere. And there's probably some in the chat seething right now. And they take this clip of him and they say, oh, look what he says. Look what he says. And they use that part that he just said there, right there, to be like, see, look. That's so funny.
Like a
guy.
What's up?
What are they trying to prove when they do that?
Here, rewind it real quick. Just rewind it like 30 seconds.
The battle of Megiddo, whatever. And so many people typically imagine that what apocalypticism is about the future, because the word apocalypticism has been filtered so heavily through Christianity. And Christianity does tend to think of the apocalypse as like something happening in the future, although early Christians thought it was going to happen pretty soon in their lifetime. Jesus is kind of dragging his feet. But they
sent me just that part. Jesus dragging his feet, and they say, look how much he hates Jesus.
Oh,
you're sharing a Jesus hater. I'm not even kidding. I get that clip in my replies like once a week. How crazy is the context? How crazy is the full context?
It just shows you how like intellectually dishonest literally all these people are. It's like you can't trust anyone.
Yeah,
everyone sucks.
That's so funny.
It's like if you have to lie to prove like your religion, that might be a clue that.
And like, look, I'm not saying like Sledge loves I'm not saying he loves Jesus. Like obviously he's like disrespectful or doesn't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but I'm pretty sure he's a historicist, first of all, and second of all, like obviously Jews don't like Jesus. You guys have been like using him to like browbeat them for 2,000 years. Like don't act like that's not true.
He's I find him though equally critical of certain aspects of Judaism too. So I mean, like you said, he's definitely a historian first, and then he has, because we've heard him say worse things about some of the ancient Jewish stuff, and even some of the
I agree.
You know, his wife is a rabbi. You know,
that's
so
a good point. Yeah.
He's not your old school typical Jew. You know.
Yeah. And it's not like I'm like a follower of Dr. Sledge either. I just these are informational videos with good, like it's just they're dumb. They're dumb people, but
yeah.
In the future is an idea really from Christianity that has sort of shadowed and flavored the way that we use this word. Most apocalyptic writers, most prophets for that matter, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Jewish tradition, don't do much in the way of trying to predict the future. They just don't. In fact, the most famous case where anyone tried to predict the future in the Hebrew Bible is in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 26, where Ezekiel made what at the time was the single most predictable prediction that one could predict. That is, Nebuchadnezzar would destroy Tyre. Well, he predicted that because Nebuchadnezzar was destroying everything. Everything, right? It's just like predicting, right? Like it's like American imperialism will continue. Yep, it's going on, right? It's a completely normal thing to predict. And then they attacked Tyre, and it didn't work. Nebuchadnezzar was repulsed, and so and Ezekiel himself actually has to come back later. He actually comes back in the same book and says, "Well, what I meant was," he has to reinterpret his own prophecy to explain the fact that he was wrong. Even though it was a completely actually predictable thing.
These are the prophecies that Christianity is built on.
Making predictions, especially clear predictions, is a bad idea. right? Folks may know the very famous quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, right? It never hurts a prophet to be too vague, right? If you predict on Tuesday, March 22nd, 2029, that blah, 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 well, your prophetic career rests on that. And so most of the prophecies, they don't predict the future by and large, right? And in general, this thing. By the way, that whole Nebuchadnezzar thing for people who are biblical literates is a real pain in their tuchus, because they have to go back and explain why the Bible, why a prophet got it wrong, and then why a prophet admits that he got it wrong, and then how he put a spin on it to fix it. And then they further spin it to further fix it. And my favorite example is, yeah, it eventually got conquered by Alexander the Great 400 years later.
Yeah, and they try to say like, oh, so really we were trying to predict Alexander the Great. That's what they do. That's what they actually do. How crazy is that? How much that is? Then
it's like the same thing. It's like they're trying to go back and retrofit something.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yes, to make it work for the thing. But just think about this. Think about all the people that you see in the replies and in the comment section and just in general online, left and right, just in general. Think about how much of them like cope so hard in their own reality bubble that has nothing to do with reality whatsoever.
Oh yeah.
And notice how many of them are like hooked on this. And now you can see why, right? Like you see why somebody who grew up on the Nebuchadnezzar prophecy, whatever, now is a 30-year-old who's in my replies crying about like Christianity being true, whatever. Like that's how it happens because they believe this stuff, or they like grew up on this stuff and they still have it. And they still believe it.
And like, I wish you had the opportunity to experience Portland, like outside of the ICE facility in person, because I think you would have gotten a kick out of it because it's like, it was literally Twitter manifest in real life. And it was just like everyone behaving in real life like they do on Twitter. And I feel like there'd be a lot of parallels with this whole situation and what you experience. Because it was a bizarre thing to watch because like everyone's just being performative. Like none of it was real. It was like being in a video game, but it was just like, this is what reality would be like if Twitter birthed the universe.
Yeah,
Wild Antifa.
It wasn't even anti. It was buffoonery. It was buffoonery on both sides.
Yeah, everybody was acting the ass at that thing.
Yeah,
true.
Wrong. I'm like, really? That's the best you got. Okay. Most Jewish apocalyptic texts just don't have much interest in the end of the world. In fact, when they do describe the end of the world, they almost always lean on Hellenistic ideas. And those Hellenistic ideas, specifically the Stoic idea, was that basically God was going to trash everything at the end. That there was going to be some kind of global conflagration, that the world would be destroyed by a giant fire. That was a very common idea in the ancient world. And so in many ways, the predictions they do give about the end of the world are themselves just the popular ones. If you want to go to a Greek philosopher at the time and ask, what's going to happen at the end of the world? They say, the Logos, the fire, is going to consume the whole world. And they're like,
by the way,
reasonable.
I just want to put that in context.
So it's
I'm of the point of view that when they're describing that, like if we were to describe that in our modern sense, right? Like if we were like, what does that sound like to you? Like if someone were to tell you that that's how they think the world's going to end, what does that think that sounds like?
That the Logos is going to destroy it?
Well,
or that we're going to end
talking about the sun, is what they're talking about. So what I think that they're talking about in ways that we would understand it is like the sun dying, the sun going supernova or whatever. They were basically saying like the sun, if the sun got even like a little bit bigger or whatever, we'll all burn, is what I think they were saying. It was like an earliest version of that. Basically, it was describing. It was their way of describing like sun death or the sun going through what we now know as, the life cycle of stars or whatever.
I don't know. You could liken it to like our current fear of nuclear war and shit like that too.
Mm-hmm. Actually, basically, it's not even really in some sense a Jewish idea as it is a Hellenistic idea, Greek idea. So let's put some context on this, right? I'm gonna say what the apocalyptic is in just a minute, but I want to put some context on this. What you have to understand about the rise of the apocalyptic is a time period in which it emerged, the political and theological upheavals that lasted from roughly about 586 BCE, when Judea was destroyed, the last independent Jewish state was
called
destroyed,
the age of the Jewish,
all the way up to around 135 of the Common Era, where the last attempt at an independence movement on the behalf of the indigenous people of Judea, Jews, against the Romans, led by Bar Kokhba, was defeated, with hundreds of thousands of Jewish people being killed in the process. What's important to understand about this political and theological landscape is that there is a major breakdown, as I mentioned earlier, in the theology of the time. As I mentioned earlier, right, this entire theology is built on what is called the Deuteronomic theology, which is, again, the idea that Yahweh and Israel have a covenant, and that covenant works in the way that the Israelites perform religious duties and Yahweh gives them stuff, right? So that is the way it's supposed to work. The prophets, the way that they understood themselves was as sort of a voice for God telling the Israelites, you're doing wrong, you're breaking the contract, and if you persist in this, God's going to punish you. God's going to break the contract. Well, after everything comes completely apart, beginning in the 8th century BCE, but by the 6th century BCE, the entire Judahite state is completely destroyed. There's just a serious problem. And the serious problem is, if the prophets were right, and if every single Judahite was massacred, well, that would have brought the prophecy to conclusion, right? You broke the treaty, and everyone's dead. Done, right? And that would have been a very neat, and I say neat, I mean not untidy, I mean except for all the gore of everyone being massacred, but it would have been a very tidy story theologically. Well, what happened? The Babylonians didn't kill everybody. They took the entire Judean aristocratic section into exile in Judea. And they kept on keeping on. Not in the land, right? Not in their own land, but in Babylon. And not only that, they had a good time. We have extensive records of the Jewish population living in ancient Babylon. And we know they were living relatively well. They owned slaves. They had land. They had businesses, right? In fact, their life was so good in Babylon, in exile, that when the Jewish people were allowed to return to Israel, to Judea, by the Persians, many didn't want to go. They're like, why do I want to return to like a rock that has no inhabitable land?
Fair.
Yeah,
I can live
fair.
here by
Fair
these
enough.
rivers, and we can like live in good. This is a great empire. They didn't want to go home, and so home, right? Because they weren't born there. They were diaspora Jews living in Babylon in comfort and security. Why go back to a wasteland to rebuild something, right, that isn't that great after all? It's like a rock in the middle of the Judean desert. And this was a big problem. In fact, there had to be Jewish people actually pressuring them to go back. So again, when we talk about the Babylonian exile and weeping by the rivers of the Euphrates or whatever, a lot of those Jews were not weeping by those rivers. They were very happy to be in exile in Babylon. And we know that because we have records of them living there. The problem, again, is a theological problem. They're still there. They still believe in Yahweh. What do you do when the prophecy meant that you were supposed to be destroyed and you weren't destroyed? So, does God make a new deal with us? Should we still believe in Yahweh? Like, the temple's been destroyed. What's going on what do we do with this Yahweh thing? The covenant doesn't make sense anymore. The covenantal theology doesn't make sense because there's a remainder that contradicts it. So what do you do? What do you do? Well, there's a couple of different options. You could try to maintain the old covenantal theology, and some people did try to do that. But you can see the logical problem with trying to maintain it. The covenant's been broken, the Judahite state's been destroyed, and its aristocracy moved to Babylon. But they're still alive. What to do with that? That's a real problem. Well, what arises as a way of settling that problem, right? The way of settling that problem is by shifting your theology, right? Never let a good catastrophe go to waste. You simply innovate your theology. Real. And what ends up emerging is a new kind of Judahite theology. In fact, I might even argue that Israelite religion went into exile, but Judaism came back. The religion that the ancient Israelites practiced would be unrecognizable to anyone here. Like killing animals and burning beer and grain to appease a sky god.
Burn the beer.
No one here recognizes a religion like that. But what comes out of exile is a theologically renovated religion that is much more like the Judaism that we might recognize now. So what happens is that they innovate. They theologically innovate. They develop a new theology that maintains the trappings of the old covenantal theology, but radically philosophically changes what it all means. And so what are those kinds of changes? The first big change is that Yahweh can't just be the God of Israel anymore. To make this work, Yahweh has to be a God of everything. Not just God of Israel and with the other gods existing out there in the world, right? This is what we call henotheism, right? Your God exists, my God exists, but my God can beat up your God. That's what the Israelites basically believed. Now, the new shift is, not only can my God beat up your God's not real. There's just one God. Monotheism emerges in the aftermath of this catastrophe.
Talk about a psyop.
So the God of the Israelites
Yeah,
is now said to be the
exactly.
only God.
Exactly, Jennifer. Exactly. It's all a fucking psyop. Exactly.
Yeah.
This is why we describe this as like a psyop. Do you guys understand? Like, so when we describe that, people are like, that's so stupid. You believe in a 2,000-year-old psyop. The psyop has just over time evolved and shifted and changed for the current situation, guys. Like, we're describing a system that's going on here.
Well, and just like he was mentioning earlier about the prophet that got the prophecy wrong, he's like, I'm not. Actually, what I meant was this. This is what I actually meant, and they're doing it again. I mean, religion is an invention. It always is. I grew up in a church that was literally invented by a little old man with a radio show. Like, he created this religion that I grew up in, and I mean, we've seen it with Lutherans, we've seen it with Mormons. Pardon me, excuse me. No, I just have a tickle. Hold on. Pardon me again. We've watched it happen with Scientology in real time. We have literally watched religions become invented, and just because they might be a couple thousand years old doesn't mean they aren't fucking invented.
Yeah. And that God is responsible for everything. And not just responsible for everything, but responsible for everything forever. God has a plan for the entire cosmos, right? This is going to be decisively important. God is planning everything, and everything that happens is according to that plan, no matter how bad it is, no matter how confusing it is. In fact, the worse it is evidence for the fact that God is preparing something amazing, right? So this kind of theology is going to be decisively important in this matter. So what also has to happen here, right, is that the Israelites, right, are going to have to begin to change the way they think about their relationship to this God. And the problem is, this God's going to have to tell them what in the world all this means. We're supposed to have this covenant, and it's supposed to do like this, and this is supposed to happen if we keep it, and this is supposed to happen if we don't. Well, we didn't, and we're still here. What's happening? Well, what ends up emerging is that new kinds of prophets emerge in which God shows them the plan, right? Now, again, hear the language here, right? The older prophets heard God and communicated what God said. The new kind of prophecy sees what God's showing them, right, and communicates what God shows them in literature. So this is a much more literary movement, and it's a much more visual movement. And it's so distinct that we now think of it as a distinct kind of religiosity. It's not prophecy. They're not speaking on behalf of God. They're describing what God has shown them, what God has revealed to them. And that is a completely different phenomenological mode of experiencing mysticism, right? A very different kind of mysticism indeed. Now, what precipitates this? How do they get the ability to, what underwrites this? And the answer is really complicated. And the short answer is, we don't know. We don't know, because we don't have good records about it. We don't have good records about how this goes down. The best theory I've seen is that what ends up happening is that the Judahites go into exile and they come in contact with an up-and-coming important religion called Zoroastrianism. Now, you have to understand that when the Judahite aristocracy goes into exile, the Judahite aristocracy is still a relatively, what's the right word to describe this here? The ancient Babylonians are like the New Yorkers of the ancient world. They're cosmopolitan, they're literate, they have an ancient culture that's been there for 1,000 years. They are wealthy, they have multiple giant temples, each of which is larger than the Israelite temple. It was a metropolis on an order of magnitude that the ancient Judahites could not imagine. Ancient Jerusalem was a backwater. It was a tiny settlement of few thousand people, right, with that little temple there that was, not much bigger than a basketball arena, right? You're talking about an aristocracy that is a relatively backwater people coming into contact with an incredibly old, incredibly literate, right? When the Judahites wanted to write diplomatic documents, they wrote it in the language of the Babylonians, Akkadian. When they arrive in Babylon, they must have been bowled over by the bumpkinhood of their existence compared to the Babylonians. Again, this is like the Mississippi aristocracy being conquered and then dragged off to New York, right? You can't imagine the shell shock of what must have happened. Furthermore, they're coming in contact with a very dynamic new religion called Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is, of course, a reform religion founded by the prophet Zoroaster, who we don't know much about. Even when he lived is not clear. But if I summarize Zoroastrianism to you, I bet it will sound immediately obvious what they believed. So
yeah, this kind of blows your mind.
Zoroastrianism is a basically dualistic religion that claims that a good God and an evil God are locked into a kind of battle for the destiny of the world. The forces of good are represented by non-physical spiritual entities.
Oh, no.
And those non-physical spiritual entities are in combat with other non-physical spiritual entities that
like
serve the bad guys. Angels and demons, right? That structure's there. Now, this good versus evil dualism is going to result in a titanic, catastrophic battle at the end of time. The forces of good will win. They will throw the forces of evil into a neither world, right? And not only that, there are even Zoroastrian prophets who are given tours of the underworld. Those tours of the underworld filtered their way up to Europe, and we're fairly confident that Dante Alighieri was influenced by them.
Hell
the
yeah.
Divine Comedy is probably being influenced by these tours of hell of the Zoroastrian literature.
I would say so.
Now, near the end of the world, there's going to be a savior figure, Saoshyant, who will lead the forces of good against the forces of evil. And at the end of time, everyone will be resurrected bodily. They will be judged, right? And there is a massive set of literature, right, being composed by Zoroaster. And the idea is that your relationship to scripture is more important in many ways than doing sacrifice, like sacrificing animals.
And consider
those priests, by the way, are called magi. You may recognize them from the Bible, right? Those are the guys that show up to adore the baby Jesus.
Okay.
Sorry, I was listening to you, but I forgot to stop the video.
You're fine. Consider that the concept of eternal damnation was not a thing anywhere in any multi-theistic culture.
Right, because humans invented the idea of hell.
Yes. Well, they invented all the ideas, I would say, except for I am a spiritualist too. But as far as like the concept of hell and eternal damnation and being tortured forever, that came out of Zoroastrianism, which then bled into other places to the point where like Christianity especially really locked into it. And that became the power and the fear by which they could rule the population, especially in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Is it true that the Jews don't believe in hell?
Well, he went over like the hell concept. It's called like Sheol or whatever. That's what it is in their world. It's like this underworld type of idea. It's not like kind of how she said, it's not this eternal burning hell idea, but really what we understand today as hell, like when I say hell and then in your mind you picture like burning fire and all this other stuff, that's actually a much later tradition that comes into the church. Probably I would say like the best way to understand it is if you read Dante's Inferno, and the literature that fed into like the proto Dante's Inferno literature is where I would say it really comes out of.
The artwork really was the thing that lit people's minds, is seeing these tortured demons eating people and, tearing them apart. And the artwork, especially, I think the church and the art, because most of the artists worked for the church. You couldn't paint something that wasn't religious for a really long time. And when they started, they kind of fed each other with the idea until they came up with all of that, and Dante specifically with the levels of hell and suffering and the different ways sins are weighted and so forth. But from what I understand with Judaism, they believe that being away from the light and love of God is basically torture enough, and that's where, like you're saying, Shoal comes into play.
And I would say this too. Whenever you're saying like, do Jews believe X or Jews believe Y? Like, I would say this. Like, when it comes to religion, like the Jews have a very diverse set of beliefs that goes and it changes a lot over time. Like, if you were to for example, to ask me, do Jews believe in reincarnation? Well, then I would tell you, it depends on which Jew you're talking about. Some view that a belief in reincarnation itself as a heresy. Well, then there's others who have and he'll go into in this Kabbalah stuff. There's others who there's like a whole reincarnation system and rules and laws and things like that, right? So it's like whenever you have a question like that, do Jews believe in hell or an afterlife or anything like that? It's always a question where it's like, which Jews are we talking about and when? Is really the question, because I could pretty much point to you Jews that believe almost every idea you could think of at any given time, and that's really how you should understand Judaism. Is it's not really that it's like this is the doctrine or this is the dogma. A lot of the Christians get this wrong, where they'll point out to me, they'll say like, Jews, their religion now is so much different than Judaism back then, and see, look, they're not even, they're based on the Talmud and they're doing the rules wrong. And I just say to those people, like, you're basically like Jew policing Jews on how to Jew right, and like that's.
I actually watched a video recently of a rabbi talking about reincarnation and how he himself believed that it was a thing, and he kind of echoed what you were just saying. It depends on who you talk to. Back way in the past, and this was talked about, I believe, in the very beginning of these videos that we're watching now, where they did believe in reincarnation, and then that went away. But some places, some sects still do hold on to that. So yeah, it's whatever you want to believe. You can find somebody who can preach it for you.
I guess I was thinking about it in the context of like, I remember vividly when I was resoundingly canceled for saying Hitler went to heaven because I didn't believe hell existed. And one of the things that really pissed me off about that whole thing was, it was like no less than 2 weeks after that happened that Dennis Prager came out with a video basically talking about how hell doesn't exist. And I was like, you fucking assholes, because I'm pretty sure it was PragerU that planted the hit piece on me in that, whatever it was, like US News or whatever the fuck paper that was. And I was like, are you serious? Are you assholes don't even believe hell exists either, which is exactly my logic in making that statement. Like, this is when I really should have clued into the JQ stuff, but I was still like, no, I have to repent.
It's all word games, right?
Hitler went to heaven. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, go fuck yourself. Hitler did go to heaven, motherfuckers.
Well, one thing I would say about the reincarnation thing that's kind of interesting, and I don't remember at what point he goes over this. Is definitely late in this lecture series, but there's what's it called? Hold on, let me think of it. The Luranic Kabbalah. So basically, what happens is there's a later tradition when the Jews get expelled out of Spain, and when that tradition comes in, that Kabbalist tradition comes in, that is really when the reincarnation and lots of the weird stuff that you're probably familiar with, that comes into play starting there, right? So around like 1490s, basically 16th century and stuff like that. So that's when they start getting really into what they call Gilgal, which is the reincarnation stuff, or they have like a lot of these like really weird, I would just say like practices that are born out of that Kabbalistic tradition from Spain.
At any rate, that should all sound pretty familiar to most of us. If you take a little Judaism and add a little Zoroastrianism to it, shake it up in your cocktail shaker, pour in a glass, you have all the ingredients for a great cocktail called Christianity or Islam.
There it is.
Judaism. Now, again, many people detest the idea that Judaism could be...
that is the clip that you should answer all your Christian friends with right there. That like clip that out of context, because that actually is exactly the point he's making. You're not even clipping it out of context.
It's so funny.
Influenced, informed, changed by non-Jewish pagan people. I got news for you. When the Jewish people arrived in this area, they would have viewed the Zoroastrians as a completely intellectually superior group of people. And I can guarantee you they would have been influenced by them. They would have been influenced by them. So Zoroastrianism probably has a huge impact. And in fact, many ways, Zoroastrianism has a huge impact in world religions in general. They also have a huge impact in music. You may know Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen. He was a Zoroastrian. So thank God for Zoroastrians. They produced at least Freddie Mercury among all things. So sadly, it's a threatened religion now. It's a very tiny religion, primarily located in Iran, America, and in Iraq, or in India rather. But they're not doing that great, unfortunately. It's pretty small. So we've now talked a little bit about the groundwork for apocalypticism. What is it, right? We call it a religious mode. And I use the word mode there for folks who have some background in philosophy, right? A mode of being. It's a way of doing religion. It's not a religion in itself, but it's an articulation within a religion. It began to exist primarily in Judaism, but obviously it will persist into Christianity. In fact, Christianity is just, in many ways, apocalyptic Judaism perfected. It's when, in fact, apocalypticism becomes the religion, right? It's when the shift completely goes over to one side, and the apocalyptic is what really matters, and Judaism becomes an adjunct riding on the tails of the apocalypticism. One can imagine Christianity that way, but also in Islam. Islam is also largely an apocalyptic religion. Again, it's a religion based on a guy being shown things by an angel. It's
totally unrelated.
Fundamentally an apocalyptic religion.
Totally unrelated.
So what makes the apocalyptic? Now, what's important to know about this is that no one sat down in Judea or in Babylon and said, I'm going to invent apocalypticism. What they did was be religious, and they innovated. And the specific religious innovations that they developed, we now call apocalypticism, right? So it's very important to note here, this is a scholarly term applied to an ancient people. And it's always important to know that when you do that, when you apply a schema to ancient people, it never fits perfectly, right? Some things are left out, some things are left in, but it's such a stable kind of scheme that we do think that this is an important and decisive break with the prophetic.
I'm gonna go run to the little goddess room. Be right back.
So what makes apocalypticism? The first thing is what I mentioned here at the last, but I'll mention it first because the last will be first in the first. Is the name apocalypticism, right? It comes from the word apokalypsis in Greek, which means to reveal or to uncover. And what's important about this literature is that what tends to group it all together is the idea that God is revealing something fundamental to the person, to the apocalyptic prophet. God's not speaking to the apocalyptic prophet, telling them, go condemn, I don't know, some king, some Israelite king, right? Go condemn those people for being bad and being rich. That's the way a prophet like Amos worked. God spoke and Amos went and said, right? Woe to you people, cows of Bashan. No, here we have God revealing various kinds of things to a human agent. And typically that's being mediated by a divine, semi-divine being, typically an angel. So an angel shows up and says, let me show you something. And what do they show them? All kinds of things. What kinds of things? Typically things like cosmology. Apocalyptic Judaism is very interested in how the universe works. If you've ever read the Hebrew Bible, one of the things that is weirdly missing from the Hebrew Bible is any discussion of how the world is arranged, right? There's some vague discussions in the book of Genesis, but there's no real sense of like, what is the world exactly? Because they're not really interested in what is the world exactly, right? They're interested in what's going on in Judea with this king. So cosmology becomes very, very important in the apocalyptic mode of Judaism. Also, they're very interested in the past. This is sometimes ironic considering that most people think of apocalypticism as primarily dealing with the future, but mostly the apocalypticists are interested in the past. So they're very interested in how did we get here? And the thing that they're very interested in is where did evil come from, right? Because if evil is in the world and it's out there, what kind of existence does it have? And they're very interested in where it came from. You'll never see much in the Hebrew Bible about them discussing the origins of evil, right? Even the whole talking snake in the Garden of Eden, the writer of that story in the book of Genesis never says, and that's where all evil comes from. It names some things, right? You have to work for your bread, and women's child pain and the pain in having a child will increase. By the way, it says that the pain will increase. It never says there wasn't any. It just will get worse, right? So it never says, and that's why everything went off the rails, right? The apocalypticists will be very interested in this. Also, they're very interested in the use of symbolism, right? The Bible doesn't do much in the way of symbolism often, right? But the apocalypticists will be very interested in symbolism. They're in fact virtually encoding their writings. And also, again, as I mentioned earlier with the ex eventu prophecy, they're going to be really interested in engaging in the same kind of social criticism that we saw in the historical Israelite prophets, but they're going to be doing it in a way that in a literary form in which they encode those criticisms by describing them as if they're happening in the future, right? So they describe present events in an encoded way as if they're happening in the future. That's going to be a tip-off for an apocalyptic writer. Amos didn't encode anything. He called people cows for being rich. He's like, you people are bad because you're rich and God hates you. Like, he's not encoding anything. Like, he's not like, and the cows will eat and become fat on the land. And blah. No, he's like, I hate you people and God hates you too, right? That's not what these apocalyptic folks do. Also, what they're really interested in is oppression, right? They're very interested in oppression and tribulation. Specifically, why do bad things keep happening to us? If our God is the only God and we have a special relationship with this God, why did the Greeks just like whip our ass? Like, that's a bad thing. Like, we just got whipped by the Romans. They just killed like a bunch of us. Like, what's going on, God? Right? That's a real important question to ask, right? I mean, we all ask the sort of like, why do bad things happen to good people question. It's like, why did we all get wiped out? Or most of us. They're very interested in why this tribulation's happening, right? And again, I say tribulation. The idea is it's real bad for a while, but for the apocalypticists, God has a plan. And not only that, the apocalypticists claim to know the plan, right? They claim to know the plan. They're also at some level interested in the end of the world. Right? Now, and I say end of the world, what they're really interested in is the righteous and the wicked being separated, and the righteous being rewarded and the wicked being damned. There's no hint of that in the Israelite religion. Everybody in the Israelite religion went to the same underworld, Sheol. It doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person. You went to the same place and it sucked. Well, the apocalyptists say that's not fair. Bad people will get punished. This idea comes directly probably from Zoroastrianism, right? So bad people get punished and the good people will get rewarded. That's the extent really of how things are going to go down in the future. And of course, right? Why does that make sense? Well, it makes sense because a lot of good people, or at least people they thought they were good, were suffering enormously under foreign occupation.
Think about how much that like nugget of an idea has completely fucked up humanity. This idea that life has to be fair and the good people are always going to win and the bad people are always going to be punished. It's like that, just like that one belief completely distorts how people see the world, and I think it kind of like unhinges them from reality about how life really works, because the reality is that life is not fair. Bad people win all the fucking time. In fact, bad people are more likely to win than good people because they're willing to do underhanded things that allow them to win. The good people don't always win. Justice is not always served, and who even decides who is good and bad anyway, because like that decision is a little bit nebulous at best. You know what I'm saying? Like, people get away with murder. People get away with committing horrible crimes. Happens all the time. People hurt other people. People like, you know, abuse other people. They like, people experience trauma. It's like that doesn't mean, I mean, I believe in karma is a real thing. So if you inflict trauma on someone, you're going to experience that at some point. But like, it's like this whole idea that life is fair and that like, if you're good, you'll be rewarded and you're bad, you'll be punished. Is just like, it's unhinged from reality.
I agree. Well, and you know, as far as fairness goes, nothing there. The fairness is, I think, really honestly kind of a myth, and it's just something invented to.
It's more like balance. Balance, I understand.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think fairness was something invented to issue revenge in the form of punishment and penalty if someone felt like they were wronged, and then it turned into and with the whole, since we're on topic of religion, it's, well, how come if we're God's chosen people, this shit keeps happening to us? So you have to invent a reason for it to be valid and make sense. Because I think what people are confusing is the concept of fairness and the concept of logic. Like, it doesn't make logical sense if we think this, then that should happen. But this then didn't happen. So why? Well, then we have to make something up to justify it.
It's also like an abdication of responsibility to a certain extent, because like if you believe that you are responsible for every good thing that happens to you and every bad thing that happens to you, that actually fucking sucks. That's actually really like because bad things are going to happen to everyone, and like when those bad things happen, looking at yourself and saying, okay, what did I do to cause this in some way, shape, or form? It's really not the most fun thing to do in the world. And I think this whole idea of like, you know, the bad people are going to get punished eventually, it's like a way of like deflecting responsibility for your contributions to the situation. You want to make yourself out to be the victim of the situation because it makes you feel better about it, about like whatever happened to you. And, you know, I'm not saying people are never victimized, but I do think that like a lot of times we cause our own pain, either by how we're viewing the situation or by us doing things that we really shouldn't have done, or maybe looking back, I'm like, that was maybe not the best idea I've ever had in the world, and this is the outcome of that idea. And it's like I just think it's a way of like abdicating responsibility to a certain extent.
Yeah, if you don't want to deal with your own repercussions or the consequences of your actions, it's easier just to say, oh, well, it's because this person, blah, blah, blah. Or people will use it to justify hurting somebody else even worse. Like, oh, they deserved it. They did this to me. It's like, well, worry about your own path. You're not the judge of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too to understand what's going on here is he's basically asking, or he's making a very logical idea where he's saying, you know, what do you do when you're in the situation of the Israelites? And what's really important here to understand from our modern perspective is the answer is what we now know as Judaism and Christianity. It's split into two ideas. They had two camps of how to deal with basically getting their temple destroyed by the Romans later on. And one camp was Christian, were the Christians, and they became Christian, what we now know as Christians, followers of the way. And the other we now know as like rabbinic Judaism, like what we now know as Jews. But they both had the same common ancestor in Second Temple Judaism.
Yep.
Occupation. They're also interested in otherworldly journeys, right? They'll go on journeys of the various realms of heaven, or they'll go on journeys to the various parts of the afterlife. It's very dualistic. That is to say, the world in apocalyptic literature is very starkly divided between the good guys and the bad guys, right? And the good guys are going to win, and the bad guys are going to lose. You don't see that in Israelite religion. In Israelite religion, the prophets are, you're doing bad, but if you do good, God will not punish you. In apocalypticism is, you are bad, and God is going to destroy you. It's a much more dualistic worldview.
You have to earn the goodness.
Which again, if you study history, in times of intense political crisis, right, dualism emerges. The good guys and the bad guys, right? Whether it's the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right?
Yo!
Or whether it's the sons of light and the sons of darkness, polarize the world, and that's often how you describe. And again, I think even Marxism is a kind of apocalypticism in many ways.
No kidding. Marxism is apocalyptic.
But you can happily roll in his grave.
No,
this is what I'm saying. Dude, this is what I have to understand. Like, people really need to understand, like, from your channel, that understand the communism thing. Do you guys understand it? It's the same thing as religion. It's literally the same thing. It's not like the only reason that we currently in the year 2025 have like separated concepts is because separating those concepts in your mind as different categories is part of the psyop itself. It works only because we categorize it in those ways. It's purely a mental construct. So if you just take down those walls, remove that mental construct, and look at it in the most clear, realistic, reality-based version of like the real world that we can see, it's obviously the same thing. That's why, you know, communism came out of a very similar question. The question of like, what do we do when our temple's destroyed? That was solved by Judaism and Christianity. They had a similar question when Napoleon emancipated the Jews. When he emancipated the Jews out of the ghettos of Europe, they had a dilemma. It was, okay, then who are we if we are not protected by our identity in the ghetto? It was, how do we now survive in a world of Gentiles without the ghetto, basically? How do we keep our identity intact in the diaspora without the ghetto, right? You get what I'm saying? And one sect of Jews became what we now know as Zionists. Well, the answer is obvious. We have to have our own country. And the other sect of Jews, just like he's explaining why it's apocalyptic, we're basically like, well, we need what I would call tikkun olam, repair the world, fix the world. And that basically they wanted to have like a one world, it's like a one world religious government of communism was basically the system, right? But to them, they thought of it in the same way, that basically communism was a way to protect or to keep the Jewish identity through alive after that identity dilemma of like, what do we do after the ghettos are gone?
It's just like so obvious that human beings just repeat the same patterns over and over and over and over and over again. And it's like maybe that is the purpose of this experience on this particular planet, right? It's just like, okay, you're going to work out your shit and you're learning how to deal with emotions and all that stuff. And you're gonna just and human beings as a species are just gonna repeat the same patterns over and over and over and over and over again, because that is the point of this school that is Earth, is to teach you these specific lessons that relate to these patterns.
Yeah, and like a better way to really think about like who the Jewish identity is it's basically like this priest class of people that were from the Middle East who kept their identity intact for 2,000 years through the religion, through rewriting their religion, and through not only that, but like providing almost like religious services to their host nation, if that makes sense, like the Muslims and the Christians, basically. And I gotta let my dog out here, but I'm still listening.
All right, cool.
And that's often how you describe. And again, I think even Marxism is a kind of apocalypticism in many ways. He would hate that idea, moment. But he can happily roll in his grave.
That was real great.
Paying back some of that anti-Semitism on the Jewish question. So anyway, right? Also, what's
dude,
apocalypticism?
I just ran back to my desk.
Someone's
I had to clip this. What timestamp is this at? This is
at 42 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay.
We'll listen again.
In his grave.
We'll go back
whether the good guys and the bad guys, right? Whether it's the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right? Or whether it's the sons of light versus the sons of darkness, polarize the world, and that's often how you describe. And again, I think even Marxism is a kind of apocalypticism in many ways. He would hate that idea, but he can happily roll in his grave. Paying back some of that anti-Semitism on the Jewish question. So anyway, right? Also, what's really important about apocalypticism is someone's going to fix all this, right? Because clearly, if you look at the time period being conquered by the Greeks, being conquered by the Romans, being massacred by various people, it's pretty clear that we're not going to be the ones to fix this. And so what do they say? There's going to be some kind of savior figure who's going to enter into history and fix all this. And that, of course, as it ferments a little while, becomes the fine wine of messianism. That some person, or persons, by the way, early messianism never agreed about how many it would be. Many people thought it would be 2 messiahs. And one of those would die, right? And another one would become a military general and win. So ancient Judaism was never clear about there being just one Messiah. Many sections of Judaism actually believe there would be at least 2. So, right? Now the Christians fix that by like having him die and come back later. They're just waiting on that last part.
Hold on, pause it real quick.
This is literally
what Adam's book is about. I'm watching my dog, so at some point I might have to stop and yell at her. But listen, this is what we're talking about. People like Richard Carrier, who's like a mythicist, and like many people will say like the Jews wouldn't have invented like a suffering or a dying Messiah. You can clearly see right here that is false. The dual Messiah. The dual Messiah concept, or the dual Messiah motif, was very popular in multiple sects of Judaism. I would say like the Essene version is likely the one that kind of seeped into Christianity, but like the idea that like Jews wouldn't have came up with like a suffering Messiah figure It's just totally not true. It's completely not true. They had this idea for a very, very long time. And yes, most Jews believe in and have for most of history, 90% of the time, have believed in like the military conquering Messiah, right? But just like I said before, it's not really about like what do Jews believe. It's about like what Jews at what time believe what. And for a very long period of time before Christianity, right, we have evidence that they believed in a suffering Messiah, and that figure later becomes Jesus, which is why there's no historical guy. If that concept predates that, then why would it? What are you talking about, historical guy? So then you believe in the prophecy? So then a real guy came? Like, what are you talking about?
I never thought that one of the Messiah, the concept of the Messiah was military. I always thought of him as a political leader, an activist, or something like that. And so it's interesting to hear that he's talking about a general that would come along and conquer.
You were a Christian, right?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. So basically Judaism teaches like a military Messiah, and that's why Jews rejected Jesus, because basically the Messiah is supposed to basically come out, be a military conqueror, defeat all the enemies of the Jews, and all the world is going to bow to him. Essentially, is the idea. So Jesus wasn't the Messiah to the Jews because he didn't do that. Basically, is like one of their main arguments, I would say.
So by the time there was, let's just say Jesus was real, just for argument's sake, by the time he came around and the Christians embraced him as a suffering Messiah, the Jews had already gotten rid of the suffering Messiah concept, and they're holding on to the military. Is that?
No, I would just say the military one was like the most prominent. Like that was what the Pharisees believed in. That's what the Sadducees believed in, and like a lot of the other sects. And then basically I would say after the temple is destroyed, that is when you get the real clean break between them. Before that, it's very murky, which I would never say like, oh, this, like I would never make generalizations about it before the temple destruction, because so many different Jews believe different things. Like certain Pharisees might have believed in the dual Messiah and things like that. So.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Right on. Cool. Thanks.
Also, there's all kind of anti-Messiah characters, right? If you have a good guy fighting for the good guys, you're going to have a bad guy fighting for the bad guys. That's the Antichrist. And there are lots of different stories about the bad guys, right? Christianity really likes the bad guys too. And they make for good movies. The structure of heaven and hells is going to be a big part of the apocalyptic world. If they're going to describe to you where you're going to go when you die or where you get resurrected, they want you to know about it. And if there's really vivid depictions of the hellish worlds in the afterlife, it's pretty motivating. Like, I don't want to go there where they like boil you in excrement forever. That sounds bad. I don't want to go there. I'm going to be a good guy, right? So they're very interested in the structures of the various heavens and the hells, and they're also interested in the idea that behind the scenes of what's apparent to us, the world is actually being dominated by a vast majority of spiritual creatures. Typically, we now know them as angels and demons. And so, again, if you look at the Hebrew Bible, there are basically very little in terms of angels and demons. They kind of show up from time to time, right? But in the apocalyptic, they are everywhere. Angels and demons are literally all around you, engaging in titanic spiritual warfare for the destiny of the world, right? And every country has its own angel. Right? Michael's the angel of this country, Gabriel's the angel of this country, and every country has their own demon, etc. So the scale of things is also bigger. In Israelite literature, they kind of don't like the Egyptians, and they kind of don't like the Assyrians. But you never have a global analysis of the world because they're kind of a parochial people. The apocalyptic writers are not parochial. They imagine the entire world divided into countries, and they explain political science in terms of this spiritual battles that are going on behind the scenes that we don't see. Their literature, which we'll talk about more in just a moment, is typically pseudo-anonymous, although they like to claim that very ancient people wrote them. So Enoch wrote this, or Abraham wrote this, or Shem, right, wrote this. So they like to allege ancient authorship because, if it's just like Menachem, the dude down the street, wrote this, who cares? Right? Like, Manny wrote a book about angels? Like, yeah, Manny, the guy that like fixes our shoes. Like, the hell does he know? Right? So, Manny the shoe guy, Manny the cobbler's like, nah, Enoch wrote this. Right? And so he puts Enoch's name on it, right? A patriarch who never died and was like, Noah's grandfather or whatever. Noah's father. Like, yeah, Enoch, that dude, yeah, he was real. let's read his book, right? So you throw a name on like Abraham on there, and people are willing to read your book. They're not going to read Manny's book about the end of the world. No one cares about what Manny thinks.
Is he saying other people wrote these books and
Let's talk.
Use the names of historical figures?
Yeah, to give them more credibility. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. They did that.
It was all a scam.
Yeah.
Every book in the Bible, or I would say almost every book in the Bible, is kind of like that. The New Testament is certainly like that, and the more like scholarship is done on the New Testament, the more like the only things that are like left kind of standing, I would say, inside the gospel or inside the New Testament is like the 7 authentic Pauline letters, and
I was
those
gonna say the epistles have to be a little bit.
There's new scholarship that has just been published by Nina Lively that basically deconstructs that whole idea, and she is by far the leading expert on Pauline literature in the entire world. So she, in her newest book, she makes the case that the quote-unquote 7 authentic Pauline letters are not actually authentic themselves, and she dates them to late 2nd century, or I'm sorry, or late 2nd century. About so you have to read it to know that. I can't remember the exact dating she puts it. It's late. It's very, very late. She puts it.
In other words, it wasn't written in time. Yeah. Interesting.
This is a recurring theme, is that they say like it would be like if I wrote a book today, right, and I released it and I said, hey guys, this is actually the super secret book that who am I thinking of? Who's the guy? Oh my god, I can't think of his name.
Is he political? Historical figure?
I just had an idea.
I got a good idea. Okay, it would be like this. It'd be like if I said, hey guys, I have a book where Freddie Mercury wrote out these prophecies of what's going to happen in the future. And the prophecy is that 9/11 is going to happen. On 9/11, planes are going to fly into the towers. And Freddie Mercury wrote that. Hold on, that's the literature that we're dealing with.
But he wrote it 30 years before it happened, man.
Right. But think about how crazy this is. So that's what's happening. Is it's people like in today's time writing about someone from the past predicting something that happens in the in-between time between those 2 points. And that's so important. So it's literal prophecy fraud is what it is.
Yeah.
It's any kind of fraud. Like any kind of fraud. If this was a business and you were doing that as a business, that's called fraud in the books, right?
Yeah.
And if you did that in like any other way in the entire world, everyone would call that fraud. But when it's religion, we call it prophecy.
Yeah.
You know what I should do? I should write a book basically describing what communists believe, but attribute it to some like famous fucking leftist that people would know the name of. Maybe it's like the found like guys, I was on a Google Drive and I found this manuscript written by this famous communist before they died or something that never got published. Here it is. I should totally do that.
That is exactly, dude. That's how so many of the stories of like how like the books are made or whatever in the Bible. It's like exactly how you just described that. Like somebody saying, "Oh, I found a scroll behind the bookshelf, and it was a whole new letter." Like that it's crazy.
Or you know what I actually should do, like unironically, just publish a book called like What I Believe, and like just have the author line be like a communist or something like that, and then start circulating that in like conservative circles. It would be the same thing as like when what was it like the when those things got introduced into Congress that were like, here are the goals of communism or whatever, written by like communists. It's like, I think conservatives would actually take it more seriously if it was just a generic kind of like thing. I'm gonna think about this. This is like the 87,000th book idea I've had in the past 3 weeks.
I used to joke that like the letters, when they say these are the letters of, you know, Paul or Peter or whoever, and I would joke like, well, honestly, that's a pretty common name. How do we know it's that one? How do we know it's that Paul or that Peter or that John? Like it could have been any number of them. So you don't know.
Well, the name Jesus specifically, like Joshua, like he said earlier, Josh, it was basically like the most common name possible back then.
Bob the Savior.
Yeah, basic his and it also means like Yeshua saves, right? So it's so it's basically like his name is like God man or healer man, like he's like the God man essentially is what his name means.
God man.
Yeah.
God man.
Yay.
Like it means Yeshua saves, right? So it means God saves. So basically like to them back then when they heard that name, it would have been essentially like God man, like a God. Oh, he's the God man that saves us. He's like the God man who rescues us, God man who saves us.
The son
Son
of
of, son of Sky
Yep.
Daddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Into what makes this work, right? Why would anyone write all this stuff down? Well, the first is historical and psychological. You're living
Amalek,
as
you should write a book.
Judahite.
Amalek, your book should be titled "The Myth of the God Man." That's a good title.
I love
And you
that.
should just you like explain all this stuff. Like I'm sure Adam's book is great and all that, but I'm sure Adam's book is also really technical. You could also like break it down into allegory and be like, this is what actually happened in the form of like an action movie or whatever. You guys
Only if I can use the word retard at least once per page. No.
I think you should. That would
Your
be a
cover-
really great idea.
Cover needs to be like the Superman S outside, but with a G in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God, man.
In a world of theological and political turmoil, right? Now, I don't know about you. I don't like turmoil. And when my life is in turmoil, one of the things I try to figure out is, why is this happening to me? Right? Because we think, because we're stupid, that if we understand something, we get power over it. You don't.
That's actually smart.
Right? You could be real smart, and they basically just like throw you into a jail or whatever, right?
No, I
But
It
disagree.
does take away your
if bad
fear
things are
of
happening
it.
to you, you want
I disagree with that emphatically. Like I reverse engineer. I spend sometimes days, weeks, months, sometimes even years reverse engineering shit that have happened. And I do feel like it does give you a power over the situation. You're like, oh, okay.
Don't they say
I get
knowledge
it.
is power?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
understand
Yeah,
why.
I would say like basically
There's
what
no-
he's describing is like collective self-reflection.
Yeah. It's like what actually happened and how can I not have this happen again?
No person I don't think of, right? You can be as existentialist as the day is long, right? And you're still going to want to know what's going on. Why is it happening? Right? Why is this happening? Very few people are going to suffer through immense, like physical and psychological turmoil and think to themselves, okay, guess that just happened, right? Most people don't do that. So what do? They try to explain why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Further, right? Not only do they want to explain why it's happening, they want to feel like it's not for no reason. No one likes the idea that you just went through a traumatic experience and it's meaningless. You're on a rock, free from the sun, in the middle of a void, and in 4 billion years, the sun's going to swallow this planet, and every bad thing that's ever happened to you is not only not going to be a memory, this Earth won't even exist.
Perspective.
We don't want to.
I've thought about that on like a
Yeah.
non-frequent basis. It's like, and I started thinking about this when I was in middle school. I remember specifically about the lesson where someday the red dwarf is gonna swallow Earth, and I was like,
Oh, yeah.
so nothing even matters. I had an existential crisis at 13 years old when I learned about this.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, I figured I'll be dead by then, so it won't matter, you
Yeah.
know. But to think that everything you know is gone. There's even a video of like the end of the universe, like what happens and how everything just disappears into absolutely nothing. And I'm like, no more stars, no more nothing. Like it just, and it's so fucking sad. And I was like practically in tears just thinking this is all this beauty is going to be gone, not, and it's not observed, it's not remembered, nothing. Not to say that could actually happen. It may not, it may be recreated.
No, it's gonna happen. So it will happen eventually. Someday the sun will swallow the Earth.
Well,
and
that, yeah, but this was like
everything
the
that
whole
ever has
universe.
ever happened and will ever happen will be gone.
This is why we have eternal souls,
Yeah, exactly.
so that we can remember it eternally. But you know what really fucked me up is when I was thinking about the end of the universe, the complete everything, and that is known, is then it started making me think, did we invent the concept of the soul to comfort us, to make us feel like we'll still be here? And then
See, I don't buy into that, but
well, it's just a mind experiment. It's just something to think about. It's like, what if we are psyoping ourselves going, oh yeah, I have an eternal soul. It's fine. It's fine.
maybe.
Oh,
That doesn't make sense from a human perspective. We want to understand why our traumas are happening. We want our traumas to mean something. And so, what do they mean? Well, the overwhelming data we get from the apocalyptic literature is that God has planned every single thing that's happening in the world. So this is a very deterministic literature, and that your suffering is not random. It's part of a plan. And what's that plan? The end of the world. right? The world is going in a very specific direction, and God is going to make things right. Punishing the wicked, rewarding the righteous. This is all part of the plan. I think also Nietzsche a lot tonight. What's wrong with me? Right? And I think Nietzsche said, right, that the person who
Very
has a why can endure
he's being very
anyhow.
anti-Semitic.
Right? The person that has a why can endure anyhow. People can get through anything, if as long as they have a reason why it's happening to them. Right? I think I may have that backwards. Right? And so the idea here, right, is that basically what you get is you get a reason why this is happening to you. And what's the reason? It's all part of a plan. And the apocalypticist has been revealed that plan. Lastly, a big part of this entire whole drama is that no one likes being colonized. No one likes being oppressed. No one likes having their country destroyed by foreigners. No one likes foreigners moving into their country and taking all their stuff and enslaving them. No one's really about that. That's bad. And so you want to protest against it, right?
No.
You want to protest against it, right? When the French come into Algeria and destroy that country, the Algerians are like, we ain't having it, right? And they protest against it. Now, there are a lot of different ways you can protest. One way of protesting is militarily trying to fight the Romans. You can try that. And people did. And they had very limited success. You can also write books about how they're bad, and God hates them, and God's going to judge them, and God's going to kill them eventually. Now, again, as I said earlier, you can't come out and just write that way, right? Boo the Romans. Tiberius sucks, and God's going to kill him. And the Romans going to be like, that's interesting. How would you like to be crucified, right? So they're not going to do that. They're going to encode it. And if you know, right? Hamavin Yavin, right? If you know, and anyone who knew how to read this literature could read the code. They're like, yeah, the Romans, they don't get their ass whooped by this God and whoop their ass. And you're like, yeah. And the Romans are like, what are you reading? Like, nothing. Right? So that was a way of encoding this. Now, how does all this work? God has to tell you. God has to reveal to you the plan, you, the apocalyptic prophet. And that's what this literature is. It's the plan. It's the way the world is structured. God built the world. God structured the world. History itself is unfolding according to very set rules set down by God, and everything is part of the plan. Everything's part of the plan. And the apocalyptic literature is marked by that revealing, that uncovering. As you might imagine, in a world of turmoil, which I know Jewish people go through turmoil, right? Every once in a while, there's a little turmoil here and there, right? Little turmoil. You can imagine this was an incredibly persuasive form of religiosity. It explained why the world was the way it was, right? It described why bad things were happening. It told you where it all came from. It tells you how it's going to all end. And it tells you that the things that you're going through as a people and as an individual are not random. And they're not punishment from God. Right? Also, by the old Israelite theology, every bad thing happening to you is punishment from Yahweh. Right? No. You're suffering because that's part of the plan in which Yahweh is secretly collaborating and is going to whoop these people.
You see where trust the plan shit comes from?
Yeah. And abdicating all responsibility for your actions or whatever you did to cause the situation in the first place.
And who are you abdicating the responsibility to in this case?
God.
Like materialistically, who? To a priest class of people who say they're speaking to God. You're literally like an ethnic priest class of people who said they're speaking to God.
Well, you don't know. Maybe they are speaking to God. I'm being facetious, but that's like, you think like in those days, they're like, well, what if they are talking to God? People are a lot more naive, you know?
It's funny you say that because one of the proofs that they have for, like, I've seen rabbis say this, that part of the reason that they believe that people believe, like one of the reasons that they put faith, and they'll say talk about faith is they'll say, look, Islam and Christianity, so many people believe in our Torah or believe in our ideas of the Messiah or the whatever and all that other stuff. So therefore, their belief in that's proof of God for them. How crazy is that? That is these like freak like these spin-off versions. That is how that's how some Jews internalize
circular
and rationalize it. Yes,
Argue
it
with
is.
you.
But the thing of it is like you can kind of understand why people fell for this stuff back then, because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like they couldn't read. They did, like, the churches had all this beautiful stuff. They created mystical experiences. Like, I mean, like, I don't blame ancient people for like being fooled by this stuff, but it's like in modern day, we have all the information in the world available at our fingertips, like literally at our fingertips. And you're telling me you're still relegating all your responsibility to like people who claim to be speaking for a sky god?
Yeah, pretty
Doesn't
much.
make any sense.
And back in, you remember that those beautiful churches didn't really start getting built until the Gothic era. So, like in the times when, like, say Jesus's time, like and a lot of people were illiterate. Some cultures didn't even have written languages, but they would pass things down orally. That's why they would gather at the feet of the masters, right? That's why you had rabbis. That's why you had the religious teachers that you would go and listen to these fantastical stories and tell you how to be a better person and what to do.
I mean, even if you don't have a church, like a mystical experience is a real thing. Like people
Oh,
can
yeah.
have mystical experiences, right? And
Totally.
it's like if you have some sort of like it's kind of like if someone just speaks confidently, people think they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So like imagine like a prophet shows up and like an incredible public speaker and just like, oh, this is how the world works and da 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 da, and he helps you have mystical experience. Like of course you're gonna believe him. Like you like first of all, there's like you have you have nothing else to compare it to, right?
Yeah. Well, and you're right in that later on they use those churches to create those experiences for the illiterate to give them that transcendent feeling. The church was great at capitalizing on people's emotional needs and stuff. And I think it just continued to evolve. Now we have huge angelical Christian churches where everybody's energy is singing the same hymn, and it's everybody talks about feeling the presence of God. I'm like, you're just feeling collective energy, which is incredibly powerful. Sorry, we're getting a little tangential, but
happens.
I don't know about you, right? It's one of the most seductive ideas imaginable. And again, when I track this onto things like, again, folks may know I wrote my dissertation on Marx. It's difficult to read.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, he wrote it. I just saw you say it on Twitter.
As anything other than repackaged apocalypse.
I read about that. I read that last week.
It reads very much like an apocalyptic literature, right? Evil emerged with various modes of production.
But you might like it.
Right? That's being driven forward by history, and eventually it's going to come to a cataclysmic battle, and then after that, everything's going to be great. Right? Dictatorship of the proletariat or whatever. You're like,
oh my God!
Didn't we heard this already? Right? But Marx is like, it's material now, son. It's not God doing it.
Oh,
yes.
Fire. How did you not?
What?
Like you picked this out. Like, did you not recognize all the socialism in it?
Oh yeah, no, I totally. That's one of the reasons I'm like, you're gonna get a fucking kick and a half out of this.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I specifically. But I think what's funny is his language. Even though he is a communist, it almost sounds like he's criticizing communism as he's criticizing the religion, as he's being a scholar about things. It's like it surprises me that he buys into communism knowing all that he knows. It's like, you should be smarter than this. I don't know. I'm confused.
I don't think he's criticizing it. I think he's putting it in language that he understands.
Oh, okay. That maybe
like he's making an analogy.
Gotcha.
Jennifer, have you ever seen his interview that he did with Neil? Nazi
No,
informant?
I have not.
Okay, I'll link it to you here in a second. He did an interview with my friend Neil, and he goes over and he explains that he's a post-theist, is how he describes himself.
Interesting.
So he has like a materialistic view of the world, but he recognizes that in so doing your ancestral rituals, that in itself provides value, essentially. So that's basically his point of view, is like how I would describe it.
I kind of like that because, as a pagan, I know that celebrating a full moon, dancing around a fire at midnight is not changing the world, but it really is good for my energetic and mental health. And I enjoy the process of it. For me, that's experiencing being a human being. It doesn't mean that that's the only right way to have blah, blah, blah experience. It's just what fills me up. And if that's kind of where he's coming from, I actually can respect that. So to me, it's not about who's right or what religion is right. It's about if you're fulfilled.
To me, like the way I view this is like I've explained that the Bible to me is like kind of a blueprint that it kind of like makes it so that behavior is reinforced, right? So over many generations of following the Bible, certain behaviors are going to be reinforced. And to me, what this is like really demonstrating, like as we watch this, and it's reminding me of, is that like this whole idea of like the communism and the religion and all this stuff, where it's kind of like what I would call like the eternal seething loser. The person who lost every war. They got invaded by the Assyrians. They got invaded by the Egyptians. They get destroyed. The Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans. Everyone's just completely destroying them. And it's basically like every single one of these kind of like next parts of the religion or next version of the religion is just kind of like a cope and a seethe over and over and over again. And you see that playing out in the way that he's basically like, he's a communist, right? And communism comes and is born out of that resentment, basically, of the eternal loser who's always getting invaded, who's always losing their stuff, and the whole thing.
That is an excellent point. I love how you phrased that. That really gives me a good perspective on it. I can understand it better now. Nice. Very cool.
This has been the apocalyptic form of literature flourished for hundreds of years. One could even argue for 1,000 years, beginning roughly about 350 BCE and extending all the way through in the Middle Ages, honestly, right? Because, Jews with the turmoil, it continued. And so the apocalyptic literature kept being produced. Christianity is in many ways an apocalyptic religion. It's a religion that more forcefully accepts the apocalyptic paradigm than any other form of Judaism, with the exceptions of the Essenes, those folks living at Qumran that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. They believed it so much, by the way, that when the Jews revolted against the Romans, the folks that lived at that site, if Josephus can be trusted to do anything other than make Josephus look good, they fought. They thought the world was about to come to its final end. They tried to organize a resistance to the Romans. They were massacred at 2 battles. And guess what? They stored all their scrolls in the caves near their buildings, and they never came back for them. Why? Because they were dead, because they thought this was all part of the plan. Lucky for us, the scrolls sat there more or less for a couple thousand years, and now we have them. And we can even see in the literature where they're planning for this battle, even describing the banners and horns that they will be blowing and carrying in the battle. And I bet you, when that legion of Roman soldiers were like, why are they blowing horns and stuff, right? Then they were like, did they think that's going to work? And then the Romans massacred them, and they left their scrolls there. Apocalypse is a hell of a drug. I mean, like, when you literally believe God is going to intervene on your behalf at the very last moment to save you, if that's your battle plan, stay home, right? If that's your strategy, and that was their strategy, it seems.
This is so crazy. Isn't this what I say about politics? Karlyn, isn't this what I'm saying?
Yes.
This is literally what I'm trying to tell our people. If our plan is that we're going to take up the cross and we're going to fight against Zionism and people in our countries being corrupt and the whole thing, we are fucking, it's done. We lost. It's over.
Oh, it's over. Yeah, it's over. We lost a long time ago.
Real quick, I just wanted to mention something too.
Yeah.
What he's talking about, part of what he's talking about is the Bar Kokhba revolt. Okay. And let me just read like a couple passages describing what happened there. Okay. So it says, the whole of Judea has been stirred up, and the Jews everywhere were showing signs of disturbance. Very few of them in the end survived. 50 of their most important strongholds and 985 of their best-known villagers were totally and completely razed to the ground, not a person left. 580,000 men were slain in the various raids, battles, and numbers of those who had perished by famine, disease, fire, and burning to death was past finding out. Thus, nearly the whole of Judea lay desolate. Many Romans, moreover, perished in the war. Therefore, Hadrian, when writing to the Senate, says, employs the opening phases commonly infected by the emperors. If you and your children are in health, it is well. I am and my legions are in health. However, it has been bloody. And then it goes on and says, Cassius Dio casually drops the 580,000 in that line here, which is like an uncountable number, right? Like that's not probably a literal number or anything like that. It's such like an enormous number, basically, right? It would be like saying thousands or millions or anything like that. And like, this is what they were dealing with. And in Josephus, he describes it like this. Now, I don't think that this is accurate, right? But Josephus is he takes a lot of what I would say is like liberties in his writing. And this is how he describes the revolt. He says, there was blood flowing in rivers, ankle deep, up to the temple. So many were crucified, they ran out of wood. Crosses were lacking and space was lacking to place men on the hills of the crosses. They ran out of room to put people. He says the tree cutters had to go 90, it says 16 to 17 kilometers, because all of the nearby wood had been exhausted out of Judea, right? So he's basically explaining they're trying to explain just how felted the Jews were, basically. And
Wow.
yeah, they were just destroyed, basically.
I've heard some of that passage before, and it's such a visual image. And I think that's one thing that's good about Josephus's writing, is that it really gives you that image. But
yeah,
wow, damn, that's extra.
Yeah, so you just have to understand, like, you're a people from that time. You've been destroyed by every single group that you basically ever come in contact with for hundreds of years, you know.
Yeah.
And then you keep being told by God, apparently, that a military leader is going to come and like lead you. And the top guy, the Bar Kokhba revolt, you know, he's leading it, and he just gets absolutely destroyed. So it makes perfect sense that a non-violent, pacifistic, apocalyptic version of Judaism that believed in a suffering Messiah and don't resist the Romans violently. What if we resisted the Romans sort of like an MLK style, where we do like sort of like sit-ins and things like that, and we, oh, don't hurt us, we're just being nice and things like that. Oh, we're just Christians. They kind of play the victim card, right? They allow themselves, they turn the other cheek, that kind of thing. It was like a passive, non-violent strategy against the Romans, and if you think, like, it absolutely won, right? Because the Romans then become Christian. And
yeah, well, the pressure mounted. They started meek, then they started being terrorists, then they burnt the Library of Alexandria the second time, and then they just caused such havoc and problems and killing Roman citizens that the emperor was just like, I just need everybody to calm the fuck down. And so he, in order to broker some peace in his own country, he went, Christianity is valid. Everybody stop killing each other. And by the way, I'm going to get baptized on his deathbed. So whatever the fuck that means. But yeah, he was trying to calm the situation down. Instead of fighting back, like, look what our government's doing now, not to get political, but instead of going to these riots and saying, everybody out of the pool, you're all going to jail, you know, they pacify them. Okay, we'll listen to you. Maybe we'll even adopt some of your ideas, you know, and that's what happened. As far as I understand it.
Of the Hebrew Bible, like the book of Daniel, is imbued with apocalypticism. The War Scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls is a very apocalyptic text. Perhaps the most famous apocalyptic text of all time is the book of Enoch, a book not included in either Christian or Jewish literature, but preserved, thank God, by the heroic people of Ethiopia, who have never been colonized, FYI, because they fought like the devil to have it not happen, and they're brilliant tacticians. But they preserved all these writings that are so important in Judaism. So anytime I think about what the Ethiopian people have done to preserve Jewish writings, I am in enormous thanks for what they've done. So what's going to also happen, and we'll get to this next time, is that apocalypticism is also going to give rise to a new form of mysticism called the Merkava mysticism, which we'll be discussing next time. How do you get this vision? How do you go see what God has to show you or what angels have to show you? Well, spiritual techniques were developed for this, and a new form of mysticism arose as a subset of apocalypticism, in which mystics described going into God's palaces and being shown this stuff. We'll get to them next week. It's scary. As you might imagine, I don't mess with any angels. Apocalyptic Judaism, right, and rabbinical Judaism, however, never quite saw eye to eye. The rabbis never fully embraced apocalypticism, right? Because the rabbis are all about the day-to-day keeping on of religious survival, not the titanic battle at the end, right? The rabbis are more like, how do we do Judaism now the temple's destroyed? How do we move the temple into our home? And the apocalyptic people out there are being like, God's going to judge these people tomorrow, right? So in many ways, apocalyptic Judaism was never quite meshed with rabbinical Judaism. And again, I'll give you just one famous quote from the the Talmud, right? It says that for every time you try to calculate when the Messiah will come, God delays the coming of the Messiah, the years that you calculated in the future.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
The rabbis
Yo,
don't
real.
like this, right? When Rabbi Akiva said, right, that Shimon Bar Kokhba is the Messiah and will save us all, the other rabbis made fun of him. They're like, grass will grow in your cheeks before the
Yeah.
Messiah comes. Like, that's not going to happen.
That's a
Unfortunately, grass
visual.
didn't grow in his cheeks because he didn't get buried because he was burned alive for supporting the Bar Kokhba rebellion.
Oh my God.
So sometimes history's mean, right? The apocalyptic is very, very dangerous. But it was incredibly popular. On the screen right now is a short list of all the apocalyptic literature from this time period. If I were to grab my collection of apocalyptic literature off the shelf, it would be longer than the Hebrew Bible. An enormous amount of literature, right, was produced in the apocalyptic genre.
Maybe the whole purpose, I'm going to get it real esoteric for a second. Maybe the whole purpose of like the human experience is to literally learn how to transcend all this lower evolved religious bullshit. Because it's like, obviously these ideas attracted people to them. I mean, there are a lot of ideas in the world, but for some reason, these specific ideas were very popular, continue to be very popular to this day. But if you look at the people who believe in like the good versus evil, like all this stuff, they tend to be, I'm sorry, lower evolved spiritual beings, I would argue, than people who have said, you know what, maybe this isn't exactly what's going on and it isn't exactly the purpose of this whole thing. And so maybe the whole purpose of like life on earth is to learn how to transcend just this lower level bullshit. And you basically keep getting sent back here until you figure it out.
Get out of the pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
and the same is true with like communism too. It's like the same, like people are attracted to like the idea of communism for like the same reasons. It's like, again, it's just like repeating the same patterns over and over again.
Yeah, it's the slave and master mentality. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Tell me what's right. Because people aren't either willing to think for themselves. They're too scared they're going to get it wrong and fuck it up or something, instead of just accepting the journey.
Yep.
Dozens of books that were very popular. For instance, at the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are more copies of the Book of Enoch than there are copies of Leviticus.
Oh, yeah?
That's Torah, folks. That's like the Torah.
I still haven't read Enoch.
Torah.
I really need to.
There are more copies of the Book of Enoch there, right? They're more interested in Enoch if we can take the amount of scrolls they had, right, as any indication. So the apocalyptic literature was incredibly important. And even with the rise of Christianity, it didn't stop being produced. We have dozens of Christian apocalyptic texts, right, including the Apocalypse of John, but other ones. You might be asking why. Well, Jesus had that pesky habit of not coming back soon enough. And Christians underwent turmoil too. They were being persecuted by the Roman Empire. They were being marginalized by the Jewish people that didn't really like them. They thought they were weird. They faced their own turmoil. Jesus wasn't coming back and people started dying. Well, what do we do with people dying and Jesus not coming back? Year after year after year. Well, you invent further and further apocalyptic ideas about what's going on. And the persecutions are all part of the plan, right? Martyrdom becomes a thing you should rush into because it's part of God's plan, right? It's part of God's plan. Of course, also in the Islamic literature, apocalypticism would also become enormously influential, and many apocalyptic Christian and Jewish ideas also make their appearance in the Quran. The Dajjal is a good example of a sort of antichrist character of the Battle of Gog and Magog, the main battle at the end of the world, which occurs in the book of Daniel and is translated into the book of the Battle of Megiddo in the Christian literature. Even the return of Jesus and the resurrection of the dead, these are all apocalyptic ideas that also occur in Islam. So Islam is also deeply influenced and in some sense an apocalyptic religion in itself. Judaism is going to increasingly abandon apocalypticism. And the answer for that is the same answer why the book of Maccabees is not included in the Bible. The rabbis, right? And also, by the way, why the Hanukkah festival is not about the Maccabees, it's about a miracle. The reason why? Disastrous rebellion after disastrous rebellion. The rabbis didn't want any more Rambos. They were tired of that machismo, we're going to fight the Roman stuff, because it just got us killed. So they said, we're not doing that anymore, and we're not going to prioritize that. And so, as you can imagine, this apocalyptic literature really gears people up to do rather extreme things. right? Because again, they all think it's.
Do you
part of the
understand
plan,
how this
and
like
God's going to
links?
intervene
Like,
in history and do whatever.
Hang on. Go ahead.
you guys see how this is a political thing that comes
Yes.
into like it's a political resistance movement against the Romans. Stop doing it violently. Stop being violent. That's bad optics. We need to do this. Oh, let's get our zines out and get over to this church. They're literally doing the exact thing that we understand as like leftist organizing is now, right? That's what they were doing with their people, where we tried the violent revolution and all the countries invaded that country, right? So you can't just do the one nation revolution. So what do you need to do? World revolution, internationalism, all the countries, and then only then can we truly be communist, right? So it's like that's how these ideas form, is they form out of like necessity, basically. It's just so crazy that people don't see that this is all the same beast that we're talking about.
I think you're absolutely right about that, and I've got it hooked into my brain that it's the loser mentality, how you phrase that, where it was like I keep losing, so therefore now I'm going to strategically find a way to use that to gain power. Woof.
Think about that next time you go to a Holocaust museum, Jennifer. Just think.
I've actually been to the one in Switzerland.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was very moving.
Well, if you ever go to a Holocaust museum again, just remind yourself of what you just said on the internet. I'm just saying.
It doesn't happen. Over and over and over again, it doesn't come to pass. But the rabbis don't like this. They think it's dangerous, and they marginalize it. And eventually, rabbinical Judaism, right, moves past apocalyptic literature, and very little of it gets produced, or not so much. Very little gets produced in the aftermath of the 135 rebellion by Bar Kokhba, but there is some, right? There are some texts that do get produced, like the Apocalypse of the 10 Signs and Perkei Mashiach and things like this. So the literature does survive a little bit longer. Just to wrap up for tonight, folks, needless to say, apocalypticism as a mode of religiosity, I would argue is the most enduring mode of religiosity in the world today. So enduring that apocalyptic ideas have entered even into things like Buddhism, right? Apocalyptic ideas flowing from this tradition have entered into things like Buddhism. Om Sharinko is a good example of an apocalyptic quasi-Buddhist sect. You may remember them for having poisoned the subway system in Japan with sarin gas in the 1990s as part of an apocalyptic agenda. To this day, in a 2012 poll, nearly 15% of people worldwide believe the world will end in their lifetime. That's millions of people, folks. That's hundreds of millions of people that believe the world's going to end in their lifetime. That's an apocalyptic idea, right?
That's
and
why people are talking about Civil War so much right now.
Of American religiosity. One can think of the Branch Davidians out there in Waco, Texas, and other kinds of.
I need to clip this up.
And again, of course, those folks.
Yeah, you do.
We've clipped this stuff before. I'm sure we've clipped some of this before, but not all of it. I just need to like repost it again.
There's a lot of good stuff.
An apocalyptic understanding of history. And of course, that probably led to them being massacred by the U.S. government. They had their own hand to play in it too, but I do think that was pretty significant mismanagement.
Hold on, I just thought about this. What do you guys think the numbers are today?
Rabbinical.
The numbers
that was a 20. Reagan just said it was a 2012 poll that they used. So if that's true, that's true. I bet you it's like way higher than 50%. I bet you it's like twice as high because of all that's going on in Israel and things like that.
Yeah, probably true, actually.
Oh, they're talking about the red heifer and all this stuff.
Yeah, I bet you it's like 30% of people believe it's true, or 40%. I bet you if you had to, in America at least. I'm gonna look it up.
And not just that though. Remember, for the Catholics, we're supposedly in the era of the final pope, and every religion seems to be culminating on this is it. The final signs have arrived. We're here. We're all gonna die. And then all of the doomsdayers, and here's another apocalyptic call, are the global warming people, and how they're, remember, just a dozen years ago they were saying we only have 12 years left. Here we are, still crushing it. And I think Greta Thunberg now is focused on Gaza for some reason. She's like walked away from the global warming thing. But yeah, there were kids like it was pre-COVID even, the suicide rate amongst teenagers during that whole, we only have AOC was, we have 8 years left, and people are, we have 8 to 12 years left, and then they kept believing it was 20 years, then it was 15, then it was 12, then it was 8, and then so they keep kind of shortening it, and then they started lengthening it again, and everybody got so confused with the suicide rate amongst teenagers. Like, I'm not gonna say it doubled, but it went up by like half, because they didn't understand what they didn't think they had a future. They were sure we were all going to be underwater or burned up or something, or frozen, or God knows what else, whatever the sermon of the day from those people were. And it's disgusting and tragic. And so, yeah, you're probably right. I would bet it's definitely much higher now.
Hey, so separate from this, and just related to something earlier, Jennifer, do you guys want to guess how many countries in the world have at least one Holocaust museum?
How many? I don't. How many countries?
How many countries have a Holocaust museum?
3.
No way, way higher. You're underestimating it by a factor of like there's like what 136 countries, so probably somewhere in the 90s or 80s.
It's about 50 of them. About 50
wow.
countries have Holocaust
Wow.
museums.
Probably just like not in Africa or Asia, but every single Western country.
Yeah, Europe, Canada.
They're all over the place. Albania, Argentina, Austria, Australia, Belarus, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, China, Croatia, Cuba, Czech Republic, Ecuador, Estonia, France, Germany, Greece, Guatemala, Hungary, Israel, obviously, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, Philippines, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Russia, Serbia, Slovakia, Slovenia, South Africa, Spain, Suriname, I don't even know what country that is, Sweden, Taiwan, Ukraine, United Kingdom, United States, Uruguay, Indonesia, and Uzbekistan.
Wow.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is like I view those museums as sort of like churches in a way, right? Where you know, in the Christian church, you go to church on Sundays and you cry that you know, some Jews and some Romans like killed God or killed Jesus or whatever, and you have to sit there and be guilty and cry about it and remember him. And the same kind of idea and feel is in those museums, and they kind of do this. They have like this similar effect. But hold on, real quick. I just looked this up, and I was dead on. Ready for this? In 2023, PRII survey found 35% of Americans believe in religious end times. Listen to this. Pew's 2022 findings found 39%. Right. So this is pre 10/7, guys. This is pre 10/7.
Wow.
This is right.
It's over.
So it says there is no 24 or 25 Pew updates on this specific metric, according to blah, 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 blah. And then, so that's one form, right? So I would say 40 to 50% of Americans believe in religious apocalypse, right? Okay. Ready for this? How many do you think believe in global warming apocalypse?
75%. 80%.
48%.
Oh, that's it?
So half the country literally believes in religious apocalypse, and the other half believes in climate apocalypse.
See, that's exactly what I was saying. It's another fucking religion. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and by the way, real quick, just to make sure everyone knows, I am like a like if you litter, you should have your hand chopped off person. But the global warming like debate and the way that whole thing, that is a bullshit psyop.
Oh yeah, big scam. Big
yeah,
scam.
so how crazy is that? So literally half of Americans believe in apocalypse via climate, and the other half believe in apocalypse via Jesus Christ and like Jewish apocalypse, basically.
So the ones that believe in the, like, say the religious, they're not saying it's going to happen right like in our lifetime.
No, all of them. Hold on, both of them say within their lifetimes. That was.
Oh, really?
Both of them. Yes.
Bring preppers back. I want
That's
them
how
to bring
cooked
the
we are.
preppers
Hold on.
back.
Think about how crazy this is. Every single person that you see in the world, that means, right? Basically, every single or in America, I guess, or whatever. Basically, what's the chances that they believe in one of those two things?
100%.
Almost 100%. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
How crazy is that? There's only like obviously there's people that believe in both, right? So let's just be fair and say like what 20% of people don't believe in either. That's crazy.
We're a minority.
Yeah, minority rights. Exactly.
Exactly. I want free college now.
Yeah, right. It's just crazy because like if we don't that's on both sides of that. Like if we don't like snap out of that into like reality, we're
Wow.
just going to continuously be manipulated by this. And what's kind of crazy is the reason that we're able to look at this and understand this issue is because we're so much more literate, like because of the efficiency of the internet and technology than ever before. Like the amount of reading that like one person can do today and the amount of learning is so far ahead of what you could have done in the ancient world. Like they're reading by like candlelight, and you know you can only
Right.
live to the age of
Devouring
whatever. Yeah,
knowledge. Yeah, we are the smartest dumb people, or the dumbest smart
Yeah.
people in history. And it makes me insane because people ask stupid questions all the time, and I'm like, okay, excuse me, shall I Google that for you?
We all have AI now. Like it's like we don't even need fucking Google. You just fucking
right?
chat GPT it.
Yeah, just whatever. Everything has an AI mabobber attached to it at this point. Ugh, unbelievable.
Well, Judaism and Kabbalah are going to win the day over and against apocalypticism. Apocalypticism was enormously important over the course of about 500 years in Judaism specifically, and it has made an enormous impact on world religiosity. I might even argue, like I said earlier, that apocalypticism as a mode of religiosity is perhaps the dominant religious mode in the world today. Right? I would be willing to make that argument, I think. But what's going to emerge in terms of mysticism for the purposes of our learning together is that a form of apocalyptic, practical apocalypticism, that is to say, a mysticism in which mystics attempt to descend into the throne room of God, is going to emerge out of the apocalyptic literature. And that form of mysticism is going to be what we'll be tackling next week, called Merkava mysticism. Merkava, chariot mysticism. You also may know the word Merkava because the Israelis have named a tank, their equivalent of the M1 Abrams, after the chariot of God, which just seems inappropriate for a lot of reasons. But at any rate, what I want to put on the screen right now are just some recommended readings. If you want to grab these ISBNs, and I'm going to share these slides with everybody for the class so you can have access to the slides later. But if you want a great apocalyptic literature reader, just a collection of apocalyptic literature, this is a really great text by Reddish. The large scholar of apocalypticism in the world now is John J. Collins. His book, The Apocalyptic Imagination, is the definitive study of apocalypticism. It's the book. Right. If you take a college level class on apocalypticism, you'd be reading Collins's book. If you're interested in Christian apocalypticism, Bernard McGinn, the leading scholar in Christian mysticism, has written a really great book about apocalyptic traditions in the Middle Ages. People like Joachim of Fior, who was nuts in the most amazing way possible. And of course, also John Reeves has published another text on trajectories in Near Eastern apocalypticism, and this actually covers Jewish apocalypticism through the Middle Ages, which doesn't get much play, mostly because a lot of it's not been translated, but Reeves provides a great introduction to that literature, which is also forms of apocalypticism that survive into Jewish apocalypticism that survives into the Middle Ages. So again, another form of mysticism that emerges from the breakdown of prophecy, but renovates prophecy to do a phenomenologically different task, to show rather than tell. And show what? The whole plan of the universe, and how you, as a Jew, right, or as a non-Jew, maybe as a Roman, how you fit into it, right? And that form of mysticism, I think, is just incredibly important. Christianity, I mean, we all seen these, Christian folks that are predicting the world or whatever. It's none of this is imaginable without the apocalyptic turn in Judaism during beginning in the 4th century BCE.
Okay.
Welcome back.
So confirmed. Confirmed. Jews ruin everything. Is basically the moral of today. Jews
They're hillbilly god
everything.
currently.
Isn't it crazy how he like clearly knows about Israel and the whole politics of it, and he's like a communist, and I don't know his specific views on Israel, but like he kind of didn't really talk about this here, but I can't remember if he does, but isn't it crazy how he just doesn't ever mention that these like apocalyptic wars are, I mean, these are literally like the justifications for the state of Israel, right?
Yeah.
Just straight up. Just that why if you could just pick any senator or congressperson at random and ask them why we must protect Israel at all costs, that is what they'll say. This is what they'll say based on this Bible stuff and the whole thing. The apocalypse, Jesus coming back, those are God's chosen people. Some version of that, right? So these ideas are important. Like, they're not just like these weird ancient Jewish magical tricks or whatever. These ideas were political in nature, and they are still today having an effect on our world. So
back in I want to say back in the day, because honestly, I don't know if it was, I think they said this in the 80s, they've said it in the 90s, they've said it in the aughts. The reason we were like allies and trying to protect Israel is because they were the last or only democracy in that region, and we had to protect them because we shared the political ideology. Now it seems like it's turning a little more religious, but I don't know. It feels like there's a schism happening, and a lot of people are starting to kind of see this as maybe not the best idea to get involved in anymore.
Unfortunately for us, losing support from our country is part of the plan. Okay, like that's what's written into their lore, is essentially that they, like I said before, they view us as Esau or Edom or Rome.
Right, yeah.
And they say that we're basically going to turn our back and betray them. It's essentially
they're forcing that. They're causing their own
exactly. Hold on, and they're going to blame the anti-Semitism. They're going to say the whole.
That's exactly right. They're causing the anti-Semitism that they're then going to blame.
Yes.
That's such the broken window theory.
That's where we're at, right? As a country, we just look like I'm willing to hear out many solutions to this problem. Okay, but like right now, no one seems to be dealing with this as reality. Everyone's coping about it, talking about like they actually believe Jesus is going to come back, or those prophecies don't matter or anything like that. Like, let me tell you, the people who are like doing the whole the entire Trump administration, running the Trump administration, and the people that are running the Likud party in Israel, and the people who are running Russia and his whole apparatus, they are all dialed in on these prophecies to a level that you guys can't, I couldn't even begin to just explain to you guys how much they're into them. It's like they're obsessed with all these prophecies, guys. Okay, so these prophecies are not just unimportant, whatever. What these are is they're like geopolitical myths that they make and break these countries in a way. And we're heading to the biggest one of them all, I would say, because they see, like you were just saying, that their support is dwindling, right? So they see that they're on a time clock.
Yeah.
And the rug pull's coming, is what I would say.
So I feel like if Amalek hadn't joined us, this would have been a much more just esoteric, kind of uplifting experience. Like look at all these silly old things that happen, and isn't that kind of interesting? And Amalek's like, no, this is going on today, and we're about to have an actual apocalyptic situation because the Jews are going to cause it because they still believe all this stuff today.
Well, and as he's also saying, so do the Christians. I mean, Russia is a Christian nation. America is
so do the Muslims.
Same thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're all on board because you're talking about thousands of years of programmed ideology that these people have lived, ate, and breathed this entire time, passed down, and made it to the point where even if you don't believe in any of this stuff, you still know it. You're still ensconced in it. You can't.
Yeah.
It is not there. It is permeated everything. People see in movies and stuff. You see a movie like Constantine and you're like, oh yeah, Gabriel, Michael, God, and archangels. Oh, look, demons, Satan, hell. Everybody knows. It's like we're all inadvertently practicing Christianity on some level. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's why what I kind of am advocating for, a lot of people think oh, you're a pagan or something like that. What I'm trying to say is I don't know what the solution is as far as exactly this is where we go for sure. But what I'm saying is that we need break the orbit of this thing. We're stuck in its gravity.
Yeah.
And if we don't get some sort of force underneath of us and push as hard as we can away from it, it's going to destroy us. It's not an if or anything like that. It's just how long until we get sucked into the center of this gravity and just get completely crushed by it. And it seems it seems like it's happening pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I can't help it. I am kind of a doomsdayer, and it's probably because I've been programmed from birth to be one. But I'm more of a political one. The politics and the religions are going to clash to such a point. Something somewhere is just going to go and reset things. And so, for me, I'm moving to the country. That's my getting the fuck out of Dodge.
And I just saw somebody say in the chat. I gotta point this out. He said Nick Fuentes is written into their lore probably.
Oh no!
Oh,
I
no.
just
Here we
posted a
go.
clip the other day. Of a rabbi who makes that exact argument over 20 minutes, over a 20-minute interview. That
No way.
Nick Fuentes is evidence of God. Yeah.
His evidence of God. Oh my God, we need that on a T-shirt. We need to send it to him.
Hey, hold on,
Yeah.
Nick's people clip the clip out of context to make it look
Oh.
like it wasn't a bad thing, but that's like not a good thing that he's saying that. What he's saying is it's the same way that some Christians that I'm friends with believe that the work I do is actually helping Jesus because they believe that I am like pushing away the wicked ones and that the true believers will just know, right? And that's kind of what's
You're
going
the
on there. And
metric-
that's
you're the
not a
metric
good,
evil by which they are tested.
yeah, that's not a good place to be in. That's not good.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes, yep.
All right. Well,
We're the false prophets.
thank you, Amalek, for joining us the past 2 weeks. I think you've added a dimension that we wouldn't have otherwise had and probably made the whole situation much more depressing than it otherwise would have been. But you
Hell
know
yeah.
what? It's the truth, and I think that's important context for people. So we appreciate you.
Far
Well, I
more
have fun.
interesting
I
having
like
you
these
on board.
videos. Watching them by yourself is like not as cool as watching it with other people and like talking and like thinking like it's. I like it
Mhm.
way more. So it's
That's
fun.
why we do the
Cool.
show. That is literally why we
Yeah.
do the show. Yeah.
Cool.
And chat was
Jennifer-
fun.
Yeah, chat was mostly behaved. I had to ban a Jesus guy who came in and damned us all to hell.
They
if
really
we
get
ever
annoyed
had-
by me, don't they? It's it's real. It really is. They get really upset that I know the material as good or better than they do. Like that guy was like trying to nitpick what I was saying as if I didn't like know what the like I know what he was trying to say. Like he brought up Eamon Hillman, who's like a guy who he has like this like theories about the Bible that I don't subscribe to. That's why I said to him like, no, that's not what I was saying like right away. People they just love to do it. They love to try to like gotcha me or whatever.
Oh yeah. Christians
you
always
think-
think no one knows more about the Bible than they do, and it's really fun when they come across someone who's actually well read, and then they're quoting scriptures better than the Christian is, and it's like, who's got who here, bitch? I mean, sir.
So you need to do another show where you're arguing with Christians. I feel like that's devoid in the content space. You guys arguing with Christians again.
Oh no.
It'll happen. We'll figure it out. What I do when I come back and do something. But yeah, you're right. I got the live bringing Christians up and arguing with them. Like that whole thing was like that was like some sort of like magic we discovered or something. It was really good.
It was so
Good with
gold. It was so good, and then it got ruined somehow.
Boo.
Whatever. Boo. All right. Well, Jennifer, do you have any other announcements to make before we conclude?
Sure do. We have Indiana Jones in the Temple. I'm kidding.
We're watching fucking
on
Heathers.
Sunday.
I didn't even give you shit about this. Jennifer tried to get out of watching Heathers for movie night after she said we were going to watch Heathers because she's never fucking seen it. And then Jennifer tries to skirt out of it by saying we're going to watch fucking Indiana Jones.
Yes,
We all
Indiana
rebelled
Jones.
and told her she's not allowed because we're watching Heathers for movie night and you can't do anything about it.
I have no control.
God.
Ugh.
You promised and then you took it back.
I was like, oh, maybe I can make that work, and then I was like, I don't know, meh. Anyway, yeah, we're having a who run Bartertown kind of argument right now.
No, what's happening is Jennifer
Bartertown.
lost. She lost and she's pissed off about losing. 'cause
Well,
she
no, that
lost.
was we did a poll, and apparently everybody wanted to watch Heathers instead. And
Exactly,
that's
because
fine.
Heathers
It's
is a
a
great movie.
flick. It's gonna be fun. We'll watch that, and then I've got What the Fuck December coming up. Which is just kind of a smattering of things. I have a couple of Christmas movies include that I probably will put in a poll. I've got like Bad Santa, A Christmas Story, The Man Who Invented Christmas. And then I have I definitely am going to be playing Dogma.
Oh, good.
December.
Yeah, we should definitely watch that. That's a great movie.
Yeah, definitely speaking of Christian messaging, definitely doing Dogma. Probably while you were sleeping, maybe sneak Indiana Jones in there. I've been trying to put that in there because I do love the classics. So trying to get that in there. And then guess what? Guess what's after December?
Jennifer January. Where you get to
Jennifer
pick all the movies.
January.
Yeah. So you don't pick all the movies anyway.
Well, no, actually, I do, but I also do polls. But I mean, I think I picked some winners. And then for
you could do Jennifer. I have a plan. You could do Indiana Jones during Jennifer January.
Oh no. See, I try to pick movies during Jennifer January.
Jennifer tried, for people who don't know the joke, Jennifer tried to be like Karlyn, you can watch Heathers during your April movie
Karlyn
month, or
April.
month, and I was like,
That's
no,
what it's
Jennifer,
for.
no, we're watching it now because you haven't seen it.
You were such a brat.
No,
This is the
it's
4th movie this
my
year that I had to
my
move another
Discord.
movie. All right, I see how you read the movie. You do the freaking trivia research. You go right
I'll fucking do the trivia. I don't mind. Hang on, we got another power chat apparently. Owls are cool says, I feel the same way about the environment as Amalek. I think that's his environment. The climate change agenda is about control. I see Native Americans being targeted the most by this ideology. Native Alaskans, for instance, attribute environmental change to human climate change. Big problem. Indeed.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, like I basically think that the natural resources of your country and like the environment in itself, like it's like your sacred duty to protect those things and hand them off to your
agree.
children because they're not yours. They're like ours kind of thing.
Mhm.
And that's actually environmentalism. And this whole like carbon credit, carbon tax, global warming, like this is
Yeah.
basically a way for what I would say is like the energy industry to monetize and offload its externalities to the public is how I would describe it. And it's basically going to make the problem way worse in the same way that the kind of the student loans thing where the government guarantees student loans has now made the entire student loan situation. I mean, anyone who's dealt with it knows it's hell on earth.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just like healthcare. As soon as I got involved in healthcare,
yeah.
nobody can afford it now. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
so that's what the whole carbon credits thing is going to do. Is it would make the entire like the efficiency of the efficiency of energy will go down to the point where it will actually cause more of the problem. It's not a good system. And one last thing, that system is literally based on the Catholic system of indulgences, okay, which was an old medieval system in which you basically paid the Pope to remove your sins, okay, using money or giving the Pope land or whatever, or taxes. Yeah, exactly. And there's almost no difference in how that system is set up to the indulgence system to what I would call the carbon tax system. So the carbon tax system is literally just the modern secular version of like a church indulgence system that we used to already have.
It's such an interesting correlation that you just made. And I mean, honestly, if the government actually cared about the environment, we would have engines that run on hydrogen or water or freaking 0-point energy by now. There are patents out there that have been buried because they want us dependent, they want us immobile, they are trying to subdue. And that's my soapbox moment. I do want to make the announcement about MacBee's Monday movie night. He is getting into December next Monday with Doctor Who December. So he will be doing some classic Doctor Who episodes. I'm not sure if he's playing 1 or 2 a night, but he's got a whole bunch lined up here. So he will be doing Doctor Who December. And we're talking the old school, when it was good, not when it was woke, like the old school guys that we loved in the 70s, 80s. And yeah, so those are going to be, I think, really fabulous. Back in the day when Doctor Who was good and we loved it, the reason why there are Whovians. So that's what we'll be doing. And other than that, that's all I got. I have no idea what we're doing next Tuesday, but we'll figure out something.
We will figure it out. We always do.
Amalek, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Yep, I had fun.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next time. Have a good Thanksgiving, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving. Bye.
Bye.